Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. Today we will see what if Naruto takes off his jacket. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. Naruto fell to the ground, completely exhausted. His face was shiny with sweat, and Naruto's cheeks were flushed with heat and exhaustion. It was already dark out, and the stars were twinkling merrily above him. He had been working on his stamina and Rasengan all afternoon non-stop, and it definitely wiped him out. Some of the broken trees around him were proof enough. His limbs were stiff, and his knuckles were cut and bleeding. He had half a mind to suck them, but opted not to. I'm spent. I've got nothing left in me. Looking around, he noticed that the trees were a lot thicker in this area. That meant that he was a good distance from Konoha because the forest trees closer to the village were more spaced out. Ninjas breaking down trees when they practice. Well, this isn't good at all, whined the tanned boy as he scratched the back of his head. Sighing, he picked himself off the floor and staggered onto his sore feet. Humming a soft tune under his breath, Naruto made his way through the thick foliage, but he was so tired that he barely got anywhere after walking for half an hour. This is so messed up, believe it. How am I supposed to get back to the village this way? In his frustration, Naruto tripped over a high root, sending him flat onto his face. Blue eyes glaring at the ground, he picked himself up again and was about to continue walking when he heard something. Concentrating on the noise, he realized that it was running water. Looking back at the direction he was going before, he shrugged his shoulders and gave a foxy grin. What ninja hasn't camped out in the wilderness, anyway? Cheered Naruto. It wouldn't be too bad if he soaked his feet, washed up a little, and then slept for a few hours. He could go back home in the morning. Kakashi wasn't even going to be at the bridge until 8 o'clock. They were having a group mission with the other genin teams, so someone else was bound to be late. Naruto headed towards the direction the sound of the water was coming from. After walking for a little bit, he finally made it to where the trees were less dense and the roaring of the water was clear. Breaking out of the forest, his mouth fell open at the sight before him. In the moonlight, he could clearly make out a large shining lake, which pooled around a grand waterfall. Two large statues, built into the stone cliff, were standing on either side of it. Wow, this place is so cool. Haha, I should come here to practice water walking, yelled Naruto. Kicking off his sandals, he jogged over to the edge of the lake, and dipped his feet in. Holy foo, that's cold. Okay, so maybe it's not the best idea to stick your feet in a lake at night. Not doing that again, Naruto decided with a shake of his head. I don't know. It's pretty fun swimming here at night. Naruto screamed in surprise, toppling over, head first into the freezing water. Resurfacing, he spat out the water that had slipped into his mouth and shook the water out of his hair. The golden locks were plastered flat on his head, so he had to run his shivering fingers through it, so it would stay out of his eyes. Okay, that wasn't cool, believe it. Who are you and what do you want? Dragging himself out of the water, he reached for his weapon holster when he realized that it was gone. Looking around curiously, he heard laughter come from the trees. Over here, I'm over here. There hanging from a tree was his weapons pouch. Rushing in, he grabbed it and backed away. What do you want, bastard? Don't worry, I'm Konoha, kind of. I'm just enjoying nature out here and I really didn't feel like go back to the village. The mysterious man answered. Huh, I guess we're on the same boat. You don't mind coming out, do you? 'Cause it's really annoying talking to a tree, said a pouting Naruto. There was a moment of silence when a man appeared in a blur, a few feet from him. He wore a long black coat that covered his body, and a white mask. Interesting enough, it didn't look like an Anbu mask. Backing away cautiously, Naruto looked at the man again. How'd I know you're Konoha anyway, bastard? Not even saying a word, the man pulled his mask down, but only where you could see the headband, but not his face. It was kind of scratched up, and the blue cloth that held it in place was frayed, but the symbol of definitely Konoha. Well, now that I know you're not an evil ninja who wants to kill me. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, the next Hokage, he said with a wide grin on his face. You're kind of short and girly looking to be a Hokage. Hey, you just watch, bastard. I'm gonna be the strongest person in my village someday. Believe it. It was silent for a few seconds, before the man started to walking towards him. Oh, I believe it, but you won't be anything if you die from hypothermia. The man disappeared, and reappeared behind Naruto. Grabbing Naruto's jacket, he swiftly took it off. Naruto stuttered, and tried to hide his blush. Don't undress me, you pervert. God, why is everyone I meet perverted? Blushing even brighter at saying the last comment out loud. He ducked his head, but sighed in relief when he heard soft chuckling. Is that so? You must have a hard time training then. Summoning a stack of wood, the man lit a fire from a flame jutsu out of his hand, and laid the jacket next to it. Moving in closer, Naruto sat on the other side of the fire. You have no idea. I kinda have two senseis right now. Pervy Sage and Kaka Sensei. But both of them are obsessed with this perverted series. But they have their moments, once a month. Or less. Is that why you're training by yourself? And your teammates? You must have friends? Naruto wrinkled his nose, but his face brightened up instantly. Yeah, I have this really pretty girl on my team. She has pink hair and green eyes. She must be really nice for you to mention her with such charisma. The man responded. For a moment, Naruto thought he heard sarcasm laced in the voice, but passed it off as his imagination. Well, kind of. She hits me a lot though. And yells a lot. And likes the bastard a lot more than me. A frown marred his face at the new thoughts, but quickly banished them. Sakura wasn't really that bad. Well, to me it sounds like you're just taking what comes to you. Like you don't deserve it or something. She doesn't sound so great to me. Naruto's mouth fell open at the blunt statement, and he dipped his head down before standing up, shoulders tense. You're wrong. She's the nicest girl ever. Believe it, just seeing it as I hear it. Literally. Naruto plopped back onto the floor, calming down. This guy was so frustrating. If Naruto wasn't so completely wiped out, he'd punch this guy's face in. So what's your name? I don't feel obligated to say. I'd have to kill you if I did anyway. The man stated smugly. What was with this guy? Fuming, Naruto clenched his hands into tight fists and glared. That's not fair. I don't have to be. Slouching back down, he looked up and picked at the grass. You remind me of my other teammate. He's a real bastard, but at least you say more than just idiot and HN. So what should I call you? Chuckling dryly, the man took off his black cloak. Naruto couldn't help but stare. The ninja's hair, blue-black as a raven's feather, glistened in the light of the fire. It was down to his shoulders, but tied back into a thin ponytail. Through the long black shirt and shinobi pants, Naruto could clearly see hard, lean muscles. He briefly wondered if his face was good-looking but killed the thought before it became anything. I don't really care. If you want a name then, you can call me Atsushi. Pure ambition? Ha ha ha, and it sounds like the food, sushi. At least it's not my real name, Fishcake. Now take off your pants or you'll get a cold. Growing red, Naruto started to stutter and fidget. What was this guy doing to him? He was acting like a complete idiot. By his standards, snapping out of his shock he forced out a few words, growing confident during each refusal. What? No. Hell no. Hell to the no. I'm not giving a free show to some pervert. It was quiet again before the man spoke, his words emotionless. Don't worry. I can't see anyway. Sensing that he was touching a sore subject, Naruto didn't question what he meant. So he just tugged at his pants and set them by the fire next to his jacket. Laying on his back, he stared up at the stars. He sadly wondered if his parents were looking down on him. Were they disappointed? Were they proud? I bet his parents are proud of him. Naruto thought in his mind, as he took in the man's strong frame. After a few minutes of silence, his eyes started to feel really heavy. Ignoring the fact that he had company, he smacked himself in the face and tried his best to stay awake by rubbing his eyes furiously with the palms of his hands, but gave up. Letting his arms fall to his sides, he faced the fire, barely seeing Atsushi's masked face over the bright flames. Before Naruto even noticed, he was fast asleep. He didn't even hear Atsushi leave. When Naruto finally stirred, the morning was almost afternoon. Opening his eyes, he drowsily looked around. Suddenly remembering his company last night, he looked around. But the only evidence that the man had been there was the slightly visible scorch mark on the ground from the fire. Shit, holy shit. I can't believe I slept all morning, even with that big-ass waterfall right next to me. Scrambling onto his feet, he grabbed his discarded clothes and then slipped on his shoes, pants and jacket in hand. Making sure Tsunade's necklace was still around his neck, he jumped into the canopy of trees. His feet barely touched each branch before he was soaring off another. It was a really nice day, but Naruto had bad feeling growing inside of him. Looking up at the slightly visible sky through the tree leaves, his mind flashed back to Atsushi. I can't believe he just left me there. The least he could do was wake me up, Naruto said as he yanked on his jacket and pants. In truth, he was surprised the guy didn't try to choke him in the middle of the night, like every other ninja he met when he was by himself. But at the same time, a little part of Naruto reassured him that that guy would never hurt him intentionally. Something in his voice actually calmed Naruto. Had he met the guy before somewhere? The fuck am I thinking? I'm acting like a pansy, he bellowed at the top of his lungs, making a few birds scatter from their perches in fright. Taking one more giant leap, he made it on the main road to Konoha, and ran through the large gates. Slowing down slightly so that Izumo and Katetsu would recognize that it was him, and let him pass, Naruto waved at them quickly. The streets of Konoha were busy today, but in his panic, he didn't think about taking the rooftop route, and ended up bumping into a few street vendors on the way. He hated going through the market during this time of day. A lot of the older men and women shopped in the middle of the day, so majority of the populace was trying to glare holes into his body. Sometimes it was funny seeing them glare and then get frustrated when Naruto continued to smile, but most the time, it hurt. Sprinting into the Hokage building, he didn't even check his disheveled appearance. His jacket was unzipped, hair matted, bruised knuckles, and dirt was plastered everywhere on him. He didn't even fix his hitate, which fell from his forehead the night before and hung from his neck. "It a good job." That was the first thing Naruto heard as he skidded to a stop in the middle of the missions room. All heads snapped in his direction, the room quiet enough to hear the wind outside and his deep breaths. His lungs were burning from running so long, but the only thing he noticed were the annoyed faces of his friends and senseis. "Naruto, would you like to explain why you missed today's group mission?" Tsunade said, full glare looming over him. He didn't even have time to put his 10 cents before Sakura pushed past Ino, which she was standing beside, and stomped towards him. Her eyes were blazing with fury. And was it just his imagination, but was fire behind her? He really was expecting this, and that's what disturbed him. His blue eyes searched her face in confusion as she approached. When did he start thinking like this? "Naruto, you idiot, why do you have to be so annoying? Sasuke and I had to work extra hard today to carry your weight. Are you even listening to me? Kami, Naruto, sometimes I think you don't even want to be a ninja." Slapping him across the face, something started to crack inside of him. "Why are you so? You must have a hard time training then? Frustrating, we all. And your teammates? You must have friends? Had to start the mission late because. Sounds like you're just taking what comes your way. You weren't there. You embarrassed me and, she doesn't sound so great to me. You need to grow up. Stop being such a dead last. Just seeing it as I hear it." As he was dealt another slap from the furious girl, he looked over at the other people who were rolling their eyes and laughing, like this was okay. I mean, it happened all the time, but when was this ever okay? Did he make this okay? "Ah, Sakura, I was. Don't tell me. Tell Tsunade-sama," she yelled. Naruto looked at her face, trying to find something, but all he saw now was just a regular, angry, big four-headed kunoichi. Weren't they worried? Did they even care where he was? That was a little harsh, don't you think? Ino muttered under her breath. Only Naruto was able to hear the little comment. Kyuubi hearing, Naruto guessed they did care, but not enough to stand up for him, like he'd done a million times before for them. I mean, he wasn't unbreakable. Facing the front again, he lowered his head, a gesture unlike what Naruto would usually do in front of people. "I was training last night, so I was tired. It was a little far off, so I decided to camp out." And stopping in the middle of his speech, he wondered if he should even tell them someone else was with him. "So I stayed." The door opened softly behind him, showing the ever-comforting face of his old sensei. Iruka walked in, but stopped mid-step when he noticed the court-like feel in the room. Glancing at Naruto, he saw the distressed look that plainly showed in his features. Sighing under his breath, he rubbed his forehead. "Does the mission room decide to become a gossip bar every time I choose to come a little later?" The question sent everyone back to their jobs, not wanting to be submitted to the anger of Iruka Amino. Looking at Naruto again, his eyes widened. "Oh God, Naruto. You look like you fell into a lake. Don't just stand there like you're on trial. Go get cleaned up." Glad to have Iruka always on his side, He looked back at everyone before sprinting out of the Hokage building, feeling a little different from when he first went in. He was a little embarrassed at the fact that Iruka had to bail him out like some 2-year-old. Was that what he was to them? His eyes burned and felt moist at the thought. Rushing home, he threw open the door and ran inside. Entering his bathroom, he turned the water and kicked off his clothes. By the time he jumped in, the whole room was thick with steam. It made its skin turn red, but it was a distraction from the hot liquid threatening to pool out from his ocean blue eyes. No wonder you don't like cold water. Slipping in the shower, he banged his head on the wall in shock. Holding his head, he looked towards the bathroom door, which was currently occupied by Atsushi. A warm chuckle rumbled out of his chest as he pushed himself off the wall he was leaning against. "Are you okay, Naruto?" His voice is teasing and light, but Naruto could clearly hear the purr under it. "Pervert, don't walk into the bathroom while someone else is using it. How did you even get into my house?" "Through the front door. I was going to take the window, but the door looked more convenient." "Ugh, just wait in the kitchen," Naruto said while he nursed the bump on his head. He would have normally put up more of a fight, but Atsushi was the only person right now who didn't make him feel like crap or 2 years old. Snatching a towel from the rack, he pushed the taller man out of his way. Watching the man walk away slowly, hand lightly touching the wall, Naruto wondered why he was even here. Entering his room, he pulled on a black shirt and tried to find a pair of clean pants. Rummaging through his closet, he noticed that pretty much all his clothes needed to be washed. The day really wasn't giving him a break. After a little more shifting, Naruto found a pair of white pants Iruka had given him to wear. Naruto made sure his hair was dry and made his way to the small living room kitchenette where the man was hopefully waiting in. Atsushi was messing with an empty ramen cup that was sitting on the table, but his head snapped up when he heard Naruto's feet tapping closer and closer. "So why are you here?" Naruto nervously voiced. "Just checking if you made it back all right," he said simply. Naruto was completely mystified by him. He acted like they had known each other all their lives. Why was this man, that he barely even knew, so interested in him? Scooting into a chair across from him, Naruto stared at him for a while, both of them sitting there in silence for a couple of minutes. "How old are you?" The question popped out of his mouth before he could stop himself. "No, not that you had to tell me. I mean, well, yeah. It's fine. I'm not going to beat you up over it. I'll be 17 this year." Really? Naruto couldn't believe it. He had thought the man was closer to 20, but he assumed the mask muffled the voice enough to where it sounded deeper. The older boy, since 17 wasn't old enough to be counted as a man, got up and circled the table, letting his fingers lightly glide over the surface. Coming so that he was next to him, he reached his hand out to Naruto's face. At first Naruto pulled back, but stopped when the hand did, too. What was the worst he could do? The hand was removed from the black glove that previously covered it, revealing pale, long fingers. His hand touched Naruto's face, feeling the scars that lined his cheek, running them over his eyes, and then his lips. Giving a breathy hum, he retracted his hand and let his chin fall onto his palm. Naruto was practically radiating heat. What was that for? This guy kept him asking questions, didn't he? Atsushi looked up like he was trying to decide whether or not he should say anything. "Well, I'm blind, temporarily, maybe. I got hit by something in a battle and then it just went dark after that. But you knew where my holster was and you don't bump into things. You can't be blind. I'm a ninja." Enough said. Naruto laughed. He was starting to like this guy. "Will I be expecting you around more often?" Naruto responded in a teasing tone. It was kind of sad, but this guy probably wouldn't be sticking around for long. "If you want." The simple statement made Naruto fall out of his seat. Really? Why would you want to hang around with me?" Atsushi got up from the seat next to Naruto and brushed himself off. "Because I want to. But on 2 conditions. Naruto tensed at the last statement. I knew this was too good to be true. "Don't tell anyone, and I would prefer it if we met somewhere only we know." It sounded kind of suspicious at first, but Naruto somehow felt that he could really trust this person. Nodding his head vigorously, he smiled, but remembered that Atsushi couldn't see him and was still waiting for an answer. "Yeah, I'd like that." He hadn't been this happy in a long time. And then he said to Kaka-sensei, "Where did he learn to fight?" "At a bar? The nerve of that guy." He screamed. Naruto was retelling his mission to a silent Atsushi. trying to mimic the man's voice that had said that to him. Unfortunately, it sounded nasally and the effect of the words weren't as harsh, so Atsushi had a hard time concentrating on the actual story. They had been meeting at the waterfall for about a week now, and they spent hours talking about random things. Well, Naruto talked and Atsushi listened. Today, Naruto had gone on a mission with Sasuke, Sakura and Kakashi. It was a regular escort job, from town to town, but halfway there, they were ambushed. Long story short, the man they were escorting didn't think very highly of Naruto when he saw him fighting. That's not even the worst part. He then said, "But this guy over there, he's talking about Sasuke, is very graceful and skilled. A fine shinobi. Ugh." And Sakura was all giggly after that. Naruto pouted, sitting crossed-legged on the dirt ground, while Atsushi sat under a tree facing him. He had abandoned the cloak because of the hot weather, and sat in the shade, an arm propped up on his bent knee, while the other lay on the leg flat on the floor. There was still a lot of time left in the day, since the mission only took up the morning, so the sun was high. The lake sparkled beautifully, which looked even more spectacular with the rainbow created by the waterfall. "Hey, what is this place even called?" Naruto asked. "I noticed the statues, so it's like a Konoha monument, right?" Placing his head against the tree, Atsushi looked in the direction of the waterfall. Even wearing a mask, Naruto could tell he was in deep thought. "It's called the Valley of the End. It's where Madara Uchiha and Hashirama Senju fought for control of the village. The statues were built in their memory." His voice sounded bitter and strained. Naruto looked down at Atsushi's hands, watching them clench the fabric of his pants. "Is something wrong? Why do you go here if it bothers you so much?" Getting up from his seat against the tree, he straightened his shirt, standing tall and confident as ever. He then walked over to Naruto, and offered a gloved hand to pull him up. "It is a reminder for me. No matter what, I must keep moving forward, but to never forget what is most important. It is a reminder of how much I have changed." Placing his hands on Naruto's shoulder, he steadied him, from when he pulled too quickly and almost sent Naruto toppling over. "But for now, it's just our place." Naruto looked up at him taken aback. "Don't say it like that. It sounds so creepy. But, thank you. Don't thank me yet. Come on." Pulling Naruto towards the lake, he started to walk on water, dragging Naruto with him. Each step they took caused circle-like rings to swirl around them, and for a moment, Naruto was tempted to just fall into the lake. Clothes be damned. "Personally, I haven't sparred with anyone in a while, and it sounds like you need a partner." Naruto looked up from the shimmering water he was staring at, searching Atsushi for signs of mockery. He just stood there facing the waterfall, standing stock still. "You're still there, aren't you, Naruto?" Atsushi joked. Shaking his head, Naruto slipped into a fighting pose and automatically rushed to Atsushi. Naruto brought his fist up and jumped towards him, face squinting with concentration. Slam! Atsushi held Naruto down with his hand. He was laying flat on the surface of the water, moving his face to the side so that the water wouldn't rush into his mouth. Feeling the hand leave his back, Atsushi's face came near Naruto's ear. "You can do better, right?" Trying to kick Atsushi's legs from under him, he flipped backwards 10 feet away. And for the rest of the day, he tried to hit Atsushi at least once. Slam again. Slam and again. Slam and again. "Ouch. Did I hit you? I bet I did." "Yes." Naruto yelled in joy, but it was hard to tell since half his face was planted on the surface of the water. "No, your jacket clipped me on the finger." A black rain cloud accumulated above him, and Naruto dragged himself back onto the shore, Atsushi, not that far off. He took off his jacket and folded his hands behind his head. The sun was going down, and it was about time to be heading back to the village before it got too late, but he felt kind of disappointed that he didn't even land a hit. "Don't feel so bad. I made sure to go harder on you each time. Now get back home, don't worry your friends." Hey, why don't you teach some cool jutsu? If you're going to train me, then be my teacher. You'll be a lot better than Kakashi-sensei and Pervy Sage." "Slow down, Naruto. I'll leave the teaching to Kakashi and Jiraiya. And I wasn't teaching you anything. I merely was helping you refine what you've already learned. I'm sure they are fully capable in doing their job. I won't be your teacher because then I wouldn't be able to be your friend." Naruto was disappointed at this answer, but at least Atsushi sounded like he valued their friendship. Brushing himself off, grabbing his discarded jacket and walking back towards the forest, he scoffed. They don't care about me. They wouldn't miss me if I disappeared. Naruto, don't say that. You'll be surprised on how many people do. You're just looking in all the wrong places, idiot. Atsushi lectured. Pushing Naruto on the back, he sent him off, vanishing in a swirl of smoke when Naruto turned back around to look at him. What was that all about? And when did I tell him the pervert's name? Hi guys. Sorry I'm late, but Asuma caught himself on fire, and I had to help him out. Kakashi said. Looking up from his position on the bridge, Naruto gazed at Kakashi, who was calmly perched on one of the poles. At that point, Naruto really couldn't help but think how much of a scarecrow Kakashi looked like at that moment. Liar. Asuma-sensei was walking past here with Ino, Choji and Shikamaru only a few minutes ago. Shrieked Sakura. Naruto nodded in agreement, too busy glaring at Sasuke to actually give a verbal answer this time. Kami, that smug little smirk of his was really grating at his nerves. Kakashi led them to the Memorial Stone training ground, a place that they practically claimed for themselves. Some genin teams even thought that Team 7 had set up tripwires and traps to stop other ninjas from practicing there. It wasn't true of course, but that didn't stop rumors from flying around the village. Alright everyone, we don't have a mission today, so let's practice a bit. Sasuke, Naruto, Sakura, I want you to do a three-way spar. Whoever goes down first treats to lunch. Go! In a flash of colors, the three genin zoomed towards each other. Naruto, like always, had quickly summoned a few clones, but the jutsu was predictable enough, so they were destroyed by fireballs before they could even land a hit on Sasuke. But the fight really escalated after Naruto decided to throw in exploding tags 10 minutes into it. Both Sasuke and Naruto were so determined to get each other, that when Sakura tried to get between them, she was knocked away, and thrown to the ground. Well, we know who's treating for lunch now. Kakashi said in a bored manner. His eye followed Naruto's movements, and in truth, he'd be lying if he didn't say he thought Naruto had improved. Slam! Kakashi's eye widened in brief shock. Naruto had grabbed Sasuke, who was promptly thrown to the ground, his body bouncing from the force. But the win was short-lived as Sasuke clutched Naruto's body and pinned him down, sitting on his back to keep him on the ground. Sorry, Dobi. You get to live another day as a loser. Shut up Sasuke. I'll beat you next time. Naruto yelled, the sound slightly muffled by the dirt. He struggled under Sasuke, trying to get out from under him. Ouch. What happened? Nothing, your jacket clipped me on the finger. Naruto dropped his head on the ground. His jacket did more damage than he did. How depressing. Sasuke finally got off of Naruto, pulling a leaf out of his hair. But, at least you're not completely bad now. Keep it up, and I might just want to fight you. Sasuke smirked down at him. Jumping up from the floor, Naruto was about to add a nasty comment to that when he caught a glimpse of a small smile tugging on the ends of Sasuke's lips. His face twisted in confusion, feeling his heart start to play a beat in his chest. Naruto just stood there, not even breaking eye contact with him. When Sasuke finally raised one of his eyebrows, Naruto couldn't stop his heart from fluttering even faster and a light blush to bloom on his tan cheeks. Dobi, hurry up and wipe that dopey look off your face. I'm hungry and I'd like to eat sometime today. Why yeah, let's go get ramen. Did I say we were going to get ramen, Dobi? Kakashi turned his head in their direction, remembering when that had been Obito in him. Shaking his head to clear away the memory, he picked up Sakura, who was still knocked out from earlier. You guys go ahead and go. I'm going to drop Sakura off at her house. Sasuke and Naruto gave a nod of understanding, while Kakashi turned around and started walking away. Oh, and Naruto. Good job today. Sakura was wrong that day. Just keep doing what you did to improve. Kakashi vanished into the trees, leaving behind a stunned blonde boy. Letting the words sink in, Naruto walked silently with Sasuke to wherever he wanted to eat. A smile softly played with his pink lips, eyes shining with endless amounts of joy. Atsushi was right. Maybe he had been too blinded by his own emotions and their lecturing to notice that in the end, they did care. And this realization, and today's success, wouldn't have been discovered if Atsushi hadn't worked with him the day before. Naruto, we're going into the barbecue place. Naruto walked in with Sasuke, and immediately were noticed by Team Asuma. Choji was trying to swallow a huge piece of meat when he waved them over, alerting the others that Naruto and Sasuke were there. Naruto, Sasuke, join us for lunch, we just started eating, it's on Asuma-sensei too. Naruto noticed the distressed look on Asuma's face at having two more people to pay for, but Naruto quickly reassured him that both Sasuke and himself would be able to pay for themselves. Flagging down a waiter, everyone scooted down. These are those seats in restaurants where it's like a couch around a table. And Naruto slipped into the seat next to Ino. Sasuke followed right after Naruto settled in. It was a tight squeeze for the two, and Naruto really didn't want to be pushed against Ino, so he had no choice but to lean towards Sasuke. Naruto made sure not to fidget in fear that his body would touch Sasuke's anymore, and he'd practically be sitting on him. Whoa, when did I start worrying about that? What am I even thinking? This is ridiculous and disgusting. I don't like boys and I don't like Sasuke. Right? The thought worried him, since he doubted anyone in the group that was a male liked guys. Oi, Naruto. Eat before Choji takes your share, Shikamaru remarked. He decided that he would think about it later. The meal was intensely uncomfortable, and it didn't help that Sasuke didn't even notice Naruto's discomfort. Once they were finished, Naruto slapped some money on the table and hightailed it out of there, almost tripping over Sasuke on his way out. Sasuke was still sitting. Falling asleep that night was a pain, too. Normally, he would have visited the valley to meet with Atsushi, but it looked like it was going to rain, and he was sure the other boy would understand. He'd visit him tomorrow afternoon for sure. It was still raining outside, and lightning streaked the sky. The raindrops beat against Naruto's bedroom window, but never even bothered him in his dreamland. A lone figure cautiously made his way through the streets of Konoha, doing his best to navigate his way through the storm. Reaching his destination, he pushed himself off the ground, and soared through the air, feet barely making a sound when they landed on the windowsill's edge. Gloved fingers pried open the old window, slipping into Naruto's room. Advancing towards his bed, the man put one knee on the edge of the mattress and tapped Naruto on the shoulder. Waking up with a jolt, Naruto saw the shadow over his bed and opened his mouth to scream, but a familiar black-gloved hand covered it. You weren't there today. The statement oddly sounded like an accusation and a question too, but all the same, it woke Naruto up. His eyes glided up the strong arm, and to the body connected to it. The hand fell away, letting Naruto have the chance to give a sigh of relief. It's just you, Atsushi. I got scared that someone was here to kill me or something. Oh, and I didn't come today because I didn't want to go out, since a storm was coming. You weren't waiting out there, were you? The question made Naruto nervous. Atsushi was really attached to him, and he didn't know whether that was because he wanted a friend or he wanted something else. He doesn't know about the Kyuubi, does he? If he was Akatsuki, I think he would have kidnapped me by now. Ignoring Naruto's last question, he opted to just sit down on the end of his bed, not caring that he was soaking the sheets. How was your day? Seeing that he probably wouldn't be getting any sleep anyway, Naruto sat up. It was actually really great, believe it. I was able to hit Sasuke to the ground, but he ended up winning. But he was kind of smiling at the end. Atsushi gave an amused snort. Apparently, he found the very thought of it funny. He doesn't seem like the type of guy who smiles. Well, it wasn't really a smile. It was more like his lip was twitching upward. Atsushi, can I ask you something personal? Bowing his head in response, Naruto took that as a, go on. Well, do you think 2GU? I mean, is it okay for two guys to like each other? It was silent for a moment, before Atsushi shifted his position to where he was sitting cross-legged on Naruto's bed. Why do you ask? But in any case, I don't know whether it's right or wrong. Society looks down on it, but they look down on a lot of things. I really don't care either way. Oh well, it's just, I've liked my teammate Sakura for a long time. Actually a few years now, but I've kind of lost interest. And you want to take a shot at guys? Naruto blushed furiously, tugging at a lock of his hair in an embarrassed manner. Well, not exactly. I think I might like Sasuke Teme. It went silent after that, and for a moment Naruto thought Atsushi was going to bolt out the window. Is that so? What do you like about him? The question threw Naruto in a loop. Scratching his head, he cocked his head to the side and squinted his eyes. Not sure. It just suddenly happened today when he spoke to me. Atsushi started to chuckle softly into his hand, bursting into laughter afterwards. Calming himself down, he was immediately tackled. Naruto straddled him, grabbing his shirt, and pulling him closer. This isn't funny. I think I have feelings for my rival. This is fan-freaking-tastic. Maybe I should go to a doctor. All this training is probably messing with my head. Rolling Naruto over, he pinned Naruto's hands above him. The sheets had fallen off his bed, and his nightshirt had traveled up his stomach a bit. Growing silent, Naruto gulped, his throat feeling unusually dry. The blush he already had before spread from the bridge of his nose and glowed everywhere, successfully lighting his face up. He was staring at Atsushi's mask, even more curious to what was behind it. Something pulsed inside of him when Atsushi leaned in. His black hair hung down, lightly tickling Naruto's neck, and he had the sudden urge to pull on it. "Do you think Sasuke likes boys?" Atsushi whispered in his ear. Well, I don't know." Naruto stuttered back, ignoring the temperature rising in the room. Atsushi was silent again. Naruto was sure he could hear the thundering tempo growing in his chest. "Just don't get hurt." In an instant, Atsushi was gone, leaving behind a completely flustered Naruto behind. The window hung open, revealing the beautiful night sky. Naruto didn't even notice that the rain had stopped. What have I gotten myself into? Go Lee, show them the youth that burns within. Guy cheered. The day was unusually hot, to the point where if you looked closely, you would be able to see the heat waves. The day was relatively silent along the abandoned streets of the village, since most civilians were comfortably inside, avoiding the harsh weather. Unfortunately for the shinobi of Konohagakure, there was guard duty, missions, teaching, and training to do. They were all miserable in the heat, cursing anyone who was sitting indoors on this scorching day. Most of them had already discarded the thickly padded flak jackets and were begging any elementally based wind ninja to be their fan for the day. But no one was more miserable than the genin. Training Ground 44, aka the Forest of Death, was currently being circled by 30 genin, which included the Konoha 12. Tsunade, who wasn't quite sober when she said it, ordered that the genin present in the village were to do a group run together, so that they can see where they stood among their fellow peers. Now, that sounded like a good idea from a distance, but not on a sweltering hot day, when majority of the genin wouldn't even be trying. Naruto, who normally wore his usual thick, orange jacket, and warm-up pants, ended up ditching both in favor of wearing the pair of clothes he had gotten for these days particularly. "Think Crescent Moon mission. Keep moving people. You can do better than this." A nameless Junin yelled out. Easy for him to say, he's not the one sweating up a storm on a day like this. Believe it, some of the other genin around Naruto nodded in agreement, too exhausted to actually form words. Naruto looked up at the sky, his mind wandering away from the heat. It's been 2 days since I've seen Atsushi. Kami, why I am even thinking of him? I thought I liked Sasuke? His mind went blank, his eye twitching and face contorted in horror. Literally dropping onto the ground in the middle of running, Naruto grabbed his head. No. When did I start thinking like that? Misery lines swirled above his head, as he imagined some god above having fun ruining his life. He avoided the creeped-out stares he was getting, and decided to start running again. If you were really listening, you could hear his almost completely silent mantra. Girls, long hair, boobs, girls, makeup, pretty, masks, black hair. EEHHH. No way this is happening. Believe it. Shut up, Naruto. A chorus of cries rang out. Ducking his head and grunting, Naruto continued at an easy pacing, looking down at the tips of his sandals. His blue eyes were unfocused and deeper today than usual. And it didn't go unnoticed. Naruto picked his head up, but much to his mortification, Sasuke was running only a few yards ahead of him. Naruto blushed as his eyes wandered farther down than just the Uchiha's family symbol in the middle of Sasuke's back. Wow, Naruto. I never tagged you as that kind of guy. Naruto practically jumped right out of his skin. Slowly moving his head to the side he saw Ino, still beautiful even when she was shiny with sweat. It was almost attractive. What are you? He was abruptly cut off by the sound of giggling coming from her. She whipped her hair back, which was starting to grow long again. Look, I'm a Yamanaka. It runs in the family that we're naturally good interrogators and emotion readers. Me being a girl, I've got radars. It wasn't hard to figure out that you like guys, which I kind of get since you had a crush on Billboard Brow, and she's manly. Naruto tried denying it, waving his hands wildly in the air, his head shaking from side to side in a frantic movement, but Ino only held up a hand. Naruto, you were pretty much tomato red and stiff as a log when we had lunch the other day. It was kind of obvious for a girl to notice. Who would have thought you liked Sasuke-kun? She said in disbelief. Naruto could easily compare himself to Hinata at the moment because he felt pretty faint. A whistle was heard, notifying them that their torture was finally over, but Naruto wasn't so lucky. He tried rushing off as swiftly as possible, but Ino kept up beside him. Seeing that he wasn't going to lose her anytime soon, he slowed his pace, letting Ino fall in step with him, her hands cutely clasped behind her back. Both of them didn't say anything, and neither knew exactly where they were going. After passing the same bench for the second time, Ino finally spoke. Look, in truth I don't like Sasuke anymore, someone else has caught my interest, but what I really want to say is. I know this must be hard to accept. My first cousin, Takano is too, and we don't see him a lot nowadays. I just want you to know that I'll be there. Naruto stared at Ino, who was facing forward. She didn't look like she was playing with him, but why was she being so nice? They had hardly talked before, so why was she reaching out to him, even when he wasn't asking for it? Sakura made me realize something that day in the mission room. She's not the best friend I had when we first entered the academy, and if I can extend my hand to the likes of her, and I can easily be beside you. Naruto's eyes were overflowing with tears. This was his first real friend. Someone that would stand beside him, support him and actually say it to his face. Sure, Atsushi was a great person, but Naruto didn't know where he stood with him, and Sasuke was in the same position, but he was his rival, too. Naruto tried wiping the tears away, but they kept coming, Ino respectfully keeping quiet so she would at least save him his pride. When all that were left were barely noticeable tear tracks and puffy red eyes, Ino grabbed his hand and pulled him with her. But if you're going to be my friend, then you gotta dress better than that. You can pay me back later. Naruto was too happy to even fully comprehend what she was saying to him. But he'd find out soon enough. What does that mean? I'm not a girl. But you're gay, so wouldn't you like dresses? Ino whined, stomping her foot on the ground. I never realized it till right now, but those ugly jumpsuits really messed up what you look like. I thought you were fat. Naruto sat in the dressing room, Ino standing above him. His hands were tightly grasping the edge of the seat, pinning himself in place. There was no way he was putting on a dress, not even for all the ramen in the world. He was surrounded by several bags of clothes, ranging from pants and shirts to shoes and underwear. That last one was hard enough to buy with another girl, but the dress was just too much. Ino, you're not getting me in a dress. Fine, but are you sure? Sasuke might think it's cute on you. Oh god, bad image. I don't even know if he likes boys. And I'd never wear a dress. Sighing dejectedly, Ino nodded her head. You couldn't win all the battles. Placing the dark blue summer dress back on the rack, she looked at it longingly. Taking it back of the railing, she went to the person at the cashier. Well, if you're not going to wear it, I will. Naruto couldn't believe this. He was shopping with a girl. Who was going to buy him a dress she had no problem wearing? Picking up the bags, he followed Ino out the door, and took a breath of relief when she said that they were done shopping. Thankfully, Naruto's apartment came before Ino's, so she made him drop the clothes inside quickly, and towed him over to her house, which was above the Yamanaka flower shop. Making sure that both her mom and dad weren't home, she carted Naruto up the stairs and into her room, which was surprisingly a lot less girly than Naruto imagined. Pushing Naruto onto a chair in front of her vanity mirror, she looked him over. Naruto, what did you do to your hair? She asked calmly. Well, I cut it myself. He said nervously. Where exactly was this going? Naruto, it looks like you hacked parts of it off with a kunai. Well, I couldn't find scissors and those were the only sharp things around. Naruto yelled back. Ino fell back in shock. It was supposed to be a figure of speech. Naruto was even scared to look at her from the mirror. He could feel something building up behind him, but he kept perfectly still and quiet. Naruto, you've got to be kidding me. I hate to admit it, but you've got the best kind of hair a blonde person could ask for, and you're cutting it with a ninja weapon. No wonder your head looks like a porcupine. Well, we're going to fix that. From now on you come to me for these things. Naruto couldn't tell if that was a threat or an offer, but either way, he deeply believed that he was being treated like a doll. Shrugging his shoulders, he let Ino shuffle through her drawers, throwing bottles on the table that he couldn't even recognize. Moving behind Naruto again, she waved at him through the mirror, catching his attention again. She then held up a dark brown bottle. "This is something I found in a Tanzaku-gai, which is southwest from here. You can only use it once a month, but it grows back an inch of your hair in less than a minute. I'm only going to let you use it once cause it's really expensive, so." Dropping some of it in his hair, she let it, magically, grow and set to work. "So Naruto, tell me about yourself." Naruto almost moved his head in question, but stopped himself so Ino wouldn't accidentally cut him. "What do you mean? We've known each other for close to 6 years. Yeah, and up until now I thought you were fat and liked girls. That's not the case anymore, is it?" Naruto didn't quite catch the side comment, "I always wanted a gay friend," but chose to listen to her and respond. Crossing his arms, he watched her from his reflection. "Well, what do you want to know?" "The basics, for now." And so for the rest of the afternoon, he told her about himself. It was everything Ino already knew, or suspected, but it sounded totally different now. Like she was seeing it in a new light. Naruto and Ino both knew that this bond was something they were going to have for a long time. He didn't even get home until 9 that night. Naruto fingered his new haircut and clothes. He kept tugging at his new garments, uncomfortable with how they looked on him. He wore a cream-colored shirt that was low collar and short-sleeved. The sleeves and around part of the top had mesh on them. His pants were a dark brown with about 5 pockets on each side, and was tied down nicely with cream-colored bandages. The shoes were black, but it didn't throw off the look. It was so not him, and at the same time it was. He missed the orange dearly, and he was tempted to throw on his orange jacket, but Ino had spent her money buying him this stuff, and it would be like spitting on her if he wore his old orange jacket. But out of everything, he most liked his haircut. It wasn't anything that extravagant or new, but it fell nicely around his face instead of looking like he had been struck by lightning. Placing his hand on the dirty old mirror, he looked closely at himself and smiled. He looked a hell lot girlier, and at first glance you wouldn't recognize him, but at least he didn't look like he came out of the circus. Settling Tsunade's necklace above his shirt, he wrapped his holster around his leg, and stepped out of his apartment, stretching his arms above his head. It was a beautiful day compared to yesterday. It was still sunny, but there was a light breeze in the air. Any lover of Konoha could tell you that it was the best place on earth on a day like this. Naruto checked the time, and seeing that he had time to spare, he strolled over to Ino's flower shop, where she was probably working this morning. It was funny how much a new pair of clothes and a haircut could do to you. A lot of the older generations that often looked at him in disgust before, glanced at him confused and curious, and then surprisingly smiled like an old memory was brought forth. It was like he looked like someone they used to know. It was kind of creepy. He lengthened his strides to the flower shop, almost jogging through the front door. Ino was facing the other direction, placing a few boxes onto shelves and wiping down the cabinet she was stepping on. Naruto waited until she was off the cabinet, in fear that he might make her fall, to speak. "Ino, how'd I look?" True to his assumption, she jumped in surprise before whirling around. She gave him an "I don't know you" look, but realization dawned on her. Hearts growing in her eyes, she squealed before vaulting over the cabinet in front of her and tackling him in a hug. "Oh my gosh, you look gorgeous. I bet you had some heads turning today. I'm that good, people." She pumped her hand in the air, and started picking up her stuff so she could leave with Naruto. The whole time, she was ignoring his protests at being called gorgeous instead of handsome. When she was finally ready, she emitted another loud squeal, causing footsteps to be heard above them. "You realize we'll look super awesome walking together. 2 gorgeous blondes with sparkling blue eyes. We'll be like 2 models." Flames appeared behind her eyes, her voice growing cockier at the sound of the new social title. Naruto just stood there in exasperation, but turned his focus when Iniachi Yamanaka and Shikaka Nara walked out of the door, which was behind Ino, before she rushed to Naruto's side, babbling about this face cream he should try. Both fathers only glanced at Naruto before continuing their conversation, but abruptly stopped again. Snapping their heads back in his direction while he was walking away with Ino, they watched him go. Was that Naruto Uzumaki? To hell if I know. Shikaku commented, walking over to the entrance and watching them go. It looked like people were moving out of their way or something when they traveled down the street. But this is going to be a troublesome day. Back with Naruto and Ino, she was drilling him about how he was going to approach Sasuke. Naruto was too flustered to answer back in full coherent sentences, but calmed himself down as they entered the Hokage building, which also contains the missions room. Is your team even in the missions room? Naruto said, breaking her speech about how he should swing his hips a little more. Yeah, that wasn't happening anytime soon. Probably. We get our missions around the same time, so they should be there already. It's too bad that some of the others won't see you. Naruto sighed in relief. This was enough for one day. It wasn't even noon, and it felt like the end of the day needed to come already. They neared the door, and it made him even more nervous. His heart started to thump in his ears, and by the heat coming from his cheeks, his facing was red again. But what was there to be embarrassed about? He was going to be Hokage one day, and that always turned heads. Squaring his shoulders, he stood up tall, at least for his short height, and confident, but still letting Ino lead the way. Ino just about skipped the rest of the way and threw open the door. Morning Shikamaru. You know I saw your dad at my house talking to my dad. He merely grunted back, showing disinterest. Look back behind her, she noticed the missing blonde beside her. Raising her fist in irritation, a vein pulsing on it, she stomped back towards the door. Poking her head out, she saw Naruto sneaking away, but he wasn't quick enough. Grabbing him by his hand, she tugged him back to the room, laughing the whole way. Pushing Naruto on the back, he stumbled in. Guys, I want you to meet my new friend. She slung her arm around his shoulders, waiting to see their reaction, and she wasn't disappointed. Asuma's mouth fell open, cigarette falling to the ground, followed by Choji's bag of chips and Shikamaru's voice. Holy hell, Naruto? Waving his hand nonchalantly, he tried pretending like there was nothing to be surprised about. Hi guys. It's a fantastic morning, believe it. Hearing the door click open again, all of them turned their heads, watching the rest of Team 7 stroll in. Sasuke's head was the first to turn. Hearing the door click open again, all of them turned their heads, watching the rest of Team 7 stroll in. Sasuke's head was the first to turn. Looking Naruto up and down, a deep frown started to etch its way onto his face. It didn't look like disgust or dislike, but more akin to disappointment. Naruto looked himself over. Was there something wrong? Feeling a slight nudge on his back, Ino accidentally pushed him forward, sending him over to where the rest of his team was standing. Naruto, what are you wearing? Sakura scrunched her face up in distaste, or jealousy, whichever. She obviously didn't agree with this new sense of style. Well, I thought it was time for a change of clothes. Kakashi eyed him before giving him a one-eyed smile like always. Well, you look good. Naruto turned his head towards Sasuke, expecting some kind of answer, but for some reason, Sasuke looked like he was in a worse mood than usual. His head was turned away, facing the front where they were handing out missions, and it agitated Naruto to no end that he was being ignored. Not caring that this was Sasuke, he started to poke him in the shoulder. Hey, what do you think, bastard? Pretty sharp, huh? Not even looking his way, Sasuke snorted. You look even more like a loser. Deflating at Sasuke's answer, he clenched his hands and was about to let loose an earthquake of a yell, but stopped when he caught the whispered comment. You looked better in the orange when you were yourself. Naruto's eyes widened. There wasn't anything that wasn't him. Sure, he loved orange to death, but the clothes weren't that big of a deal. Right? The hell, he was right. If the Uchiha didn't like it, then he could just kiss his. Wow, never knew the brat had an ass like that. Random kunoichi. Okay, creepy. Maybe he should wear his jacket. He shifted his eyes around the room, catching more than a few strange, you know what I mean, looks. He shuffled his feet across the floor as they moved up in the line, getting a thumbs up or a wink every few minutes from Ino. Shaking his head, he stood, arms crossed and nose scrunched, in annoyance. Team 7 made it to the mission desk 10 minutes later, where an anonymous desk shinobi handed them another D-rank mission. Nay, Kaka-sensei. Why can't we get a C rank or something? Painting fences are way too easy for me. Now, Naruto. Maybe another day, but for now my little genin get to do something harder than painting fences. Throwing the scroll over to Sakura, she slipped it open, scooting out of the way, so other ninja could get their missions. Her eyes roamed over the scroll, before she started to read out loud. D rank. Time span. 3 to 6 hours. Client. Feudal Lord's wife. Objective. The feudal lord's wife dropped a box of jewelry into the Canis River where it floated downstream. The box was found cracked open on a rock, her jewelry scattered along the river. Find all her jewelry. 4 pairs of earrings, 10 necklaces, 12 bracelets, 20 rings, 2 brochettes. None of them found this mission the least bit enjoyable, except for Sakura, who was thinking she'd get the chance to see Sasuke-kun without a shirt. Seeing as how they didn't need anything but themselves on this mission, they headed over immediately. It didn't take long for them to run to the river. It was fairly wide, but the water was clear and it would only go up mid-thigh. It reminded Naruto of the valley's lake, so pretty and clear. He hadn't gone there in a while, and maybe it would be a good idea to head over later that day. Saving that thought for later, he kicked off his sandals. Naruto rolled up his pants, taking his shirt off in the process. Ew. Naruto, put your shirt back on. But I don't want it getting wet. I don't care. No one wants to see you with your shirt off. Naruto turned red, a little embarrassed and angry at the same time. Trudging into the lake, he angrily yelled back at her. No one wants to see you either. A smile stretched across his face when he heard a chuckle come from Sasuke. Sakura huffed in anger before dipping into the river too. They all faced each other, counting only 3 of them in the lukewarm water. Shouldn't you be in here with us? Sasuke shot at Kakashi, who was reading in the shade. Not even looking up at them, he turned the page and gave a perverted giggle. Nope. Ignoring their lazy teacher, they went to work finding the lost jewelry. It proved a lot harder since the glare on the water from the sun made it hard to see past the surface clearly. Bending down, Naruto tried to grab a necklace that was caught between 2 rocks. He wriggled it and pulled, trying his best to take it out and not break it, but it just wouldn't budge. Yo Sasuke, help me with this one. Sasuke tossed the bracelet and rings he was holding into the bag on shore, and waded towards Naruto. What is it, idiot? Ignoring the last comment, he pointed at the necklace. It stuck pretty good there. Pick up that rock, so I can grab the necklace. Grunting in exasperation, Sasuke dug his fingers under the rock and pulled up, not even turning slightly red at the weight. Naruto pulled at the necklace one more time, successfully grabbing it from between the rocks, and moving a bit so he wouldn't get splashed when Sasuke dropped it back down. Naruto pulled any stray algae from the necklace, checking for breaks, and then turned around to give it to Sasuke, so he could place it in the bag. Still looking at the necklace, he didn't notice the body in front of him. Bumping into the person's back, he sent them both toppling over into the water. He felt something under him, and if he was guessing right, then this would be awkward. Opening up his eyes slowly, he was looking at liquidly iron-colored eyes, which were staring back at him. Sasuke's face was so close, and if he leaned in even closer he could smell tomatoes? The hell was that? Before he could think anything else, he was punched to the side by a pink blur, water entering his nose and mouth. Resurfacing, he coughed it out, occasionally sneezing, but mostly ignoring the green-eyed girl yelling at him. You idiot, stop getting in Sasuke-kun's way. Naruto just stuck his tongue out, and went back to searching for the jewelry, but he paused when he thought back to what just happened. He was on top of Sasuke. And he was leaning in. He smelled Sasuke. Oh god, what's wrong with me? He looked down gloomily. He took a glance at Sasuke, blushing when the other boy was looking at him at the same time. Both of them snapped their heads away, obviously discomfited at being caught staring. They finished their mission around noon like usual, the last of the jewelry found, and would be sent to another ninja to clean and polish. Poor guy. Tussling his hair into submission, Naruto slipped his shirt back on, his tan skin already turning a darker shade. Unfortunately for Sakura, she was now sporting a nasty sunburn on her face and arms. Naruto took great pleasure at thinking how much it would sting later. Sasuke, like always, was as pale and unchanging as ever. It's like the sun had a problem with touching him or something. Great job everyone. Tomorrow we're joining Kurenai's team with training, so bring extra material and weapons. Oh, and Naruto. Tsunade got a letter from Jiraiya. He'll be back in a month or so. With those final words, he snatched the bag from the ground and poofed off, leaving his students to have the rest of their day to themselves. Sakura was inching closer to a knowing Sasuke, who was moving away not so subtly. Sasuke, let's go have lunch together. All the training grounds are taken up, so spend the day with me. Naruto briefly wondered how she even knew that before a surge of jealousy ran through him. That was very unlike him, but being rash wasn't. Sorry Sakura, but Sasuke is helping me with something today. Maybe another time. Dragging him away from their sputtering teammate, Sasuke nodded in thanks. Laughing at Sasuke's relieved, but otherwise emotionless face, Naruto shook his head. You need to repay me. Buy me ramen. You didn't have to help me. Sasuke answered. Exactly, so treat me to ramen. Naruto said, a smile splitting his face. Sasuke took one look at that face, and just couldn't say no. He felt something in the pits of his stomach, but brushed it off as hunger. Sasuke followed behind a bouncing Naruto, who was looking a little different. Yes, he had new clothes, and his hair looked like it wasn't cut by a weapon, but he looked so. Well, Sasuke couldn't put it in words. Entering Ichiraku's, Naruto yelled out an order and jumped onto the nearest stool. Would you like anything, Sasuke? Ayame asked. Dumplings, and tea, he said briskly. Bastard, how's training going? Naruto couldn't stand silence for long, but he was used to it by now, what with Sasuke and Kakashi keeping mostly to themselves and Sakura giving him the cold shoulder more often than not. It's fine, but there's a lot to learn. He answered coolly. I'm doing pretty good myself. I'll be Hokage in no time. The bowl of ramen was set in front of him, and he picked up his chopsticks, a thank you already muttered out. The noodles were halfway to his mouth when Ino appeared in the reflection of one of the hanging pots. She held up a sign before jumping away, so Sasuke wouldn't see her. Eat slowly. Catching on quickly, he ate slowly, even if it was painful. What's wrong with you, Dobi? Sasuke was curiously bent over to look at Naruto's concentrated face. Don't tell me it takes effort out of you to eat now. Turning red at those words, he threw Ino's words out of his mind, and started to scarf down the food, sipping the last bit up in one gulp. Wiping his mouth on the back of his hand, he smiled over at Sasuke, who looked a little happier, well, as happy as Sasuke could get. Sasuke got up, drinking the last of the tea, and placing the money for the both of them on the table. We should do this more often, he said walking away. Pushing the curtain to the side, he looked Naruto up and down again. And you don't look half bad. Naruto felt heat start to spread, and a warm feeling touching his heart. Turning back to the front, he ordered another bowl. Ayame gladly agreed, placing the noodles in the water. Naruto, your secret's safe with me, Ayame said with a wink. Naruto took a few seconds to realize that she probably thought they were on a date. No, it's not like that. That blush of yours sings a different tune, she sang back. Naruto had a hard time keeping her from teasing him. Great, Ino and now Ayame. God damn it, was it really that noticeable? It was getting dark out. Naruto had been sitting at the valley for close to 3 hours and still no sign of Atsushi. Dusting himself off, Naruto headed towards the forest line to go back home. Naruto, is that you? The blonde-haired boy twisted around to see Atsushi emerge from behind the waterfall. You were behind there the whole time. I was training. Why are you here? The question confused Naruto. We always meet, and it's been a while anyway. He was obviously doing a great job at ignoring the stormy night incident, as he dubbed it. Naruto stubbornly crossed his arms and waited for Atsushi to answer. Giving a slight shrug, the masked boy ran across the lake and joined Naruto. How's Sasuke? Naruto lifted his hands up into his hair, hooking his fingers together and leaning his head back. Pretty good. He thought I looked good today. Atsushi shifted uneasily at the comment. I think you look good every day. Naruto turned pink, but lit on fire when he remembered that the other boy couldn't see. His heart started beating uncomfortably in his chest. Why yeah, we went on a date. Well actually he just bought me ramen and we talked. Is that right? Naruto almost tripped when a hand grabbed his wrist and pulled him into a run. Whoa, the hell, bastard, where are we going? Atsushi didn't answer, just tugging him along the treetops. Naruto sped up a little so that he was running next to him. He tried to shake off the hand around his wrist, but it just held on tighter. They ran like that for 30 minutes, not saying a word as the sun started to settle lower in the sky. After a while, Atsushi started to slow down, the sound of laughter and people drawing closer. Breaking out of the forest, they both landed in front of a bustling civilian town that neighbored Konoha. It was bright and alive with people and sounds. There were multiple paper lanterns up, and some people were even playing games. Gantona is having a small festival celebrating the birthday of one of their past leaders. That's why it's so busy tonight. But why did you bring me here? Atsushi pulled Naruto into the crowd, maneuvering himself better than even most that did have eyes. Because I could do better than Sasuke, he said over the roaring crowd. Naruto doubted he'd ever be the same color again. But I need to be back home for tomorrow's training. I'll have you home before midnight then. Atsushi led Naruto to an outside restaurant a little farther off from the main crowd. They sat down and waved a waiter over, who was slightly intimidated by the mask, but relaxed when he saw the smiling blonde who looked like he was red as an apple. What can I get for you two tonight? Naruto, not knowing what was on the menu, tried flipping through it. I'll have tomato soup and he'll get the spicy beef ramen. Water for both of us. Naruto looked at Atsushi gratefully and voiced a cheerful, thank you. Naruto glanced out at the crowd, looking at all the faces and games. He giggled happily. This was going to be so much fun. What are you laughing at? Atsushi asked curiously. Tonight's going to be so much fun. The food was brought out to them a few minutes later, the two steaming bowls of soup smelling like heaven. Naruto wondered if Atsushi was like Kakashi and ate his food really fast before anyone could see his face. It surprised him when the spoon went right through the mask. What was that? The spoon went right through your mask. There's an illusion around the mouth of my mask that makes it look closed off, but it's actually an open hole. It's handy. Commenting between slurps about how cool that was, Naruto ate everything down to the last drop. The ramen was kind of spicy, so his face was flushed and his tongue somewhat swollen from it. Naruto watched Atsushi finish off the last spoonful his soup, but constantly had to push his tied-back hair from falling over his shoulder. Why is your hair so long? Naruto said, touching his own at the same time. I like it shorter, but I haven't had the time to cut it. My friend, Ino, cut my hair a day ago. It's not that different, but she said it doesn't look so uneven now. She could cut your hair for you. Atsushi gave a nod of consideration, but he didn't look too excited about having to meet her. Slapping the money onto the table, the long-haired boy let Naruto drag him to several games. Naruto constantly lost, spending a chunk of his money on the same games, and laughing about it between every game. They had been at a fish-catching game for over 10 minutes, Naruto's back sore from bending over for too long. He pouted after missing another fish from the bowl, blushing when Atsushi chuckled when the man asked if he wanted to try again. These games are probably rigged. Believe it. Walking over to a moving target game, Atsushi gave the man behind the counter a few coins before moving behind the line drawn into the ground. I don't know, Naruto. Maybe you're just bad at festival games. With that hanging in the air, he pitched the ball he was holding at the moving target, getting it right in the center. Naruto's mouth opened and closed, clearly not believing that he had lost every game so far, and on his first try, Atsushi had already won something. Thanking the man at the stand, Atsushi was given 2 blank dog tag necklaces. He tossed the other one over to Naruto, who was still a little flustered at the easy win. Scrunching his nose, Naruto threw it over his head, the necklace lying beside Tsunade's. It's almost 11, we should head back, Atsushi said quietly. Guiding Naruto back to the edge of town, he let the younger boy retell his game experience, enjoying every excited word even if he was there when it happened. So was that better than Sasuke's date with you? Yeah, it was really great. Just stop saying it like it's a contest or something. Naruto yelled back, frustrated and embarrassed. And if it is? Not getting a chance to answer, Naruto was slammed against the tree next to him, the black-gloved hand covering his eyes completely. Struggling against the hold, his heart was doing flips at how close their bodies were. Something warm pressed against his lips, moving slowly and then hungrier when there was no response. Naruto put his hands on Atsushi's chest, but he protest died in his throat when he felt something wet brush across his bottom lip. Gasping at the feeling, it was at that point that he realized that Atsushi was kissing him. The tongue slid in, sliding over every centimeter of his mouth. He tried fighting the other muscle, but lost just as fast as when it first entered through his lips. He felt warm again like that night several days ago. Grabbing a hold of the older boy's hair, he tugged on it, silently asking for air. Atsushi pulled away, only a string of saliva connecting them. Naruto breathed heavily, a dazed look in his eyes when Atsushi lifted his hand from over the stunning blue eyes. The mask was back in place, leaving the raven's identity a mystery once again. But all he could remember for the rest of the night was the taste in his mouth after the kiss. Tomato. It was practically common fact that Naruto never asked questions and just did what he felt was right. It was a 50-50 deal most the time, and with Naruto's uncanny knack of being lucky, he had a lower chance of getting into real trouble. As far as anyone knew, Naruto only liked one person, and he was pretty rash and straightforward about it. So it went without saying, the question he asked was like snow in fire country. It was extremely improbable and only happened once every blue moon. How do you know someone likes you? Sakura almost lost her balance on the bridge railing she was leaning on. Her feet clamped around the wooden barrier, preventing her from falling into the water. She snapped her head towards Naruto, a stunned expression on her face. She looked around wildly to make sure that no one else had asked that question. Sasuke had gone with Kakashi to go get Kiba, so the bridge was currently occupying Hinata, Shino, Naruto and herself, so it had to have been Naruto. Sakura was even more flabbergasted that was the first thing her usually idiotic teammate would say. She had first thought that Naruto would be bursting with energy, making up for the silence Sakura, Shino and Hinata were creating. But that wasn't happening. Could you repeat the question? She pulled a stray pink hair behind her ear, peering over at Naruto, who looked overly attentive. He gave the impression of being like a 5-year-old about to be told directions to do their parents' an important job. Well, how do you know when you know, like someone? His hands made a weak floppy motion in the air, looking like a cross between shooing a person and whacking a fly. You're not trying to impress me, right? Sakura cautiously asked. Her eyes hardened slightly as she said this. No. Sakura sighed deeply in relief. Really, Naruto wasn't so bad when he wasn't hitting on her, or being loud, or late. Whatever. But it wouldn't do that much harm in informing him. Maybe it was the clothes because it was easier to talk to someone who wasn't flashing neon-colored material in your face. Sakura crossed her arms, and nodded her head, not too unlike from what Iruka used to do during class. First thing you need to know is that it depends on the person. She looked back at Naruto to make sure he was paying attention. She was delighted to see him paying more attention to what she is saying compared to mission reports. Now, that was getting somewhere. There are different kinds of girls. Some will give you letters, tease you, stare at you, praise you, ask you out. Naruto zoned out after only a few examples. His problem was that he wasn't having difficulty with a girl, but a boy. Boys. Same difference. So he liked Sasuke, and Atsushi liked him. So through a natural circle, would that mean Sasuke would like Atsushi? He almost laughed at the thought. There was just no way. Their personalities would probably clash. He licked his chapped lips, thinking about the kiss and the tomato thing. He felt like was missing something really important, like a vital point he just wasn't seeing. That was weird. He almost banged his head on the floorboards, but stopped before they considered sending him to the mental ward. Seeing as Sakura wasn't really helping with her current suggestions, Naruto would have to ask an indirect question that would benefit him. Fingering a lock of his hair, he tried to act as nonchalantly as possible. How does a guy tell a girl, then? Naruto flinched at the slight insult to himself in this scenario, but it wouldn't be good if he started asking questions like, how does a guy tell another guy he likes him? Not only would that be embarrassing, but also he wasn't ready to show his colors. Well, they compliment you, like they'll say you're pretty every day no matter what. He might take you out or help you with something just to have an excuse to be with you. Or maybe the more subtle type, like glances or quick touches. Kyahh. Well, that answered his question pretty well. He shuffled away from his overreacting teammate, who was practically spouting hearts and looked like a fish out of water. This whole crush business was sounding more and more like an espionage mission. Naruto rolled up the sleeves to his light green shirt, pacing the bridge at the same time. Each time he did, he would first face the empty road leading back to Konoha, and then Hinata, who was standing silently near Shino on the other side of the bridge. Naruto was mulling over the thought on whether he should ask Hinata's opinion or not. No harm asking her. Hinata, what do you do when a guy likes you? At the sound of his voice calling out to her, Hinata froze like rabbit caught in a trap. She couldn't decide if she should pretend to not hear him or just answer somehow. Her hands clasped in front of her, her jaw quivered in trying to answer the embarrassing question. Naruto started to walk towards her, oblivious to her inner distress. "Naruto, watch out," Hinata yelled. Not seeing what she meant, he looked in the air, looking for a flying weapon or an enemy ninja coming forward. Twisting around, he heard a creak under his left foot, which was placed over a rotting board in the middle of the bridge. Oh shit. Not having any time to react, the board collapsed underneath him, sending him into the cold water. He was careful to close his eyes so that the wooden chips wouldn't cut them. As his hands moved to push himself up to the surface, he felt a tug at his neck by the time he broke through the water. Why did he always have to fall into water? 3 times he fell in water in the past month. He could fight on water, and walk on water, so how come he could never stop himself from falling in when he wasn't in fighting mode? It was like some universal message or something. "Naruto, are you okay?" He looked up to see Kiba with Akamaru. The others had finally come back, and were also staring down at Naruto from the ledge of the bridge. "Yeah, I'm fine," Naruto called back up. He rubbed the skin around his neck, which felt slightly irritated and was probably red. His fingers lightly brushed against the string and chain that hung around his neck. His heart stopped. His eyes steered themselves down to his chest where Tsunade's necklace on the string was hanging, and the metal chain, too. But without the dog tag. It hung loosely and broken on his chest, the tag no longer connected. "You've got to be kidding me. I lost my necklace." He recalled the slight pull when the chunks of wood passed him underwater, so the necklace piece probably was wedged in the wood, which was floating downstream at the moment. Without even pardoning himself, he rushed downriver. "Naruto, come back, we have training." Kakashi tried yelling to get his attention. By the retreating figure in the distance, it obviously didn't work. He better run. Isn't that blue necklace the current and past Hokage's? He's so screwed if he lost it. Kiba stated to the quiet shinobi on the bridge. And Tsunade would be very upset. I mean, that was probably her most precious item, and she trusted Naruto with it. Kurenai commented. "Kiba." Everyone turned to Hinata, who was poking her fingers bashfully. "What is it, Hinata?" Shino asked patiently. He was pretty sure that he knew what she was about to say, anyway. Naruto was wearing 2 necklaces today. The blue 1W was still around his neck when Aichi went away. "Huh, I wonder where he got that." He was asking some advice about girls and dating. "You don't think a girl gave him that necklace, do you?" Sakura deducted. "Transitivity?" Sasuke narrowed his eyes, looking in the direction that Naruto had run off to. "The dobi, with a girl?" He felt an unusual pull around the chest area, and he rubbed it in annoyance. It's not like Naruto would return this girl's feelings, right? Sasuke had noticed that Naruto was acting somewhat strange the past few weeks, but he never thought it would be over a girl. This really wasn't worth his time, but he had to know who she was. "Not here, not here." "Ah, I found it." Naruto fished out a chunk of wood from the water. The dog tag and a little piece of the metal chain were hooked into a crevice in the wood. Naruto jerked it out, throwing the wood back into the water to float farther downstream. Naruto looked at the tag, relieved that he hadn't lost it. It was technically one of the first gifts he had ever received, and he would never be able to replace it. Humming, he pulled himself above the water, and walked on top of it the rest of the way across the river. By the looks of it, training should only be halfway done, but by the time he found them they would be finished. Seeing as he had nowhere to go, Naruto dragged himself under a tree, and started to twirl a kunai between his fingers. The sun had already dried off his wet feet, but his shoes were still slightly damp from the water. Kicking them off, Naruto fiddled with the necklace and chain. He could always buy another chain, but he never went into trinket stores. The last time he did that, the owner had thrown him out, claiming that he was going to steal something. "Naruto, I thought your team was training with Kurenai senseis." Naruto bent his head back, looking at his fellow blonde approach. Her ponytail bounced up and down as she jogged towards him. She wore her usual outfit, but there were some rips on the edge of her white arm warmers, probably from training. Greeting her enthusiastically, he waved at Shikamaru, Choji and Asuma, who were talking a little farther off. "I kinda ran off. I fell off the bridge and a chunk of wood ripped off my necklace." Ino was confused at the statement, clearly seeing the blue jewel lying comfortable around Naruto's neck. Peering closer, she saw the faint red line circling his tanned neck. Naruto held up the broken necklace for her to see. The tag looped into the string, but the metal still broken. Taking the necklace from Naruto, she inspected the chain. "So, did Sasuke give it to you?" "No," Naruto quickly replied. Ino giggled at his hasty reply, obviously not believing him. Rolling the chain in her hand, she placed it in her lap. "I have an extra chain clip you can put on this, but first you have to tell me when Sasuke gave it to you." Sighing in frustration and embarrassment, Naruto tried to deny her claims, but was shushed every time. He grew red as she began to chant about his and Sasuke's secret love. Naruto almost gagged at some of the things she started to suggest. He watched her pull out a bag of supplies, ranging from bandages to wires of different sizes. Shifting through the bag, she pulled out a small pocket that held small items like buttons and pins. After a little more teasing, she finally found the small clip, and attached it to one side of the broken necklace. He wondered why she kept around so much stuff. Some of the materials in the bag weren't even useful to a ninja. "Girls? Well, no need to tell me. I already know," she said, slipping the necklace over his head. Her assumptions were getting irritating, but Naruto thought it wise to let her think what she wanted. "I'm glad you found it. If I gave you the necklace, I would be mad if you lost it. I'll see you around, Naruto." Brushing the dirt on her knees, she ran back towards her team, but not before sending a wink to him. Naruto smiled in response, giving Team 10 a small wave before messing with the ornaments lying on his chest. Naruto's eyes began to feel heavy, the warm sun and nice breeze making sleepy. His gaze on the river became hazy, and his eyes drooped until he nodded off. Sasuke walked away from the training area where they had just finished up for the day. It was almost afternoon now, and Naruto had been missing since earlier that morning. Training really wasn't that challenging without Naruto. Hinata and Sakura just weren't tough enough, and Shino could easily be defeated once his bugs were out of the way. Sasuke was practically oozing disappointment at the day's turnout, his usual scowl carving its way even lower on his face. Sasuke smoothed out his hair and walked along the riverbank, staring at his distorted reflection. He fingered his hair again, wondering if Naruto was right and he should get it cut. Sasuke's concentration was broken when he heard splashing and yells farther ahead. Jumping into the trees, he moved swiftly through the forest, but kept to the edge. Gazing through the leaves, Sasuke saw two blonde heads really close to each other. Activating his Sharingan, he was able to see them more clearly. Ino and Naruto were sitting next to each other under a tree, talking to each other. Sasuke could only hear hushed noises, so he moved in even closer. "I gave you the necklace. I would be mad if you lost it. I'll see you around, Naruto." "Ino have Naruto the necklace?" Sasuke sat in the tree, completely still, and watched the blonde girl walk away. This didn't quite add up. Naruto and Ino and Naruto. Sasuke tried to visual them together, but the image was ripped out of his mind. Why did he even care? The idiot could do whatever he wanted. It's not like he cared or anything. Sasuke reassured himself with a nod of his head, but still heard a tiny voice saying otherwise. Jumping out of the tree, Sasuke silently landed few feet from his blonde teammate, who seemed to have fallen asleep. Crouching down, Sasuke searched Naruto's face. Sasuke's eye twitched at how he was acting. He really didn't have time to do stupid things like this, but then again, this was Naruto. His eyebrows raised at that last thought. What about Naruto? Thoroughly confused with his thoughts, Sasuke leaned in closer to Naruto. He was only a few inches away when he was struck with the sudden urge to. Rearing back, he leapt away onto the other side of the river. His heart was racing, and he prayed to every god above that he didn't want to do what it sounded like he wanted to do. Growling in disgust at himself, he stomped off, but couldn't help but turn to watch Naruto one more time. Ino was heading up his list of least liked, and it baffled to the reason why. "Thank you Kakashi for your hard work." Kakashi had just turned in a 4-day late report, and much to his joy, Iruka wasn't there to scold him. All the other Chunin just took it without complaining, so whenever he wasn't feeling up to having a fun verbal battle, Kakashi knew to avoid the weekday afternoons, and sometimes the weekend mornings. Pulling out his bright orange book, he flipped open to the page he left off on. He strolled out the mission room door, expertly dodging the people walking by, but he only got to read a sentence before he was interrupted by Izumo. The Chunin was heading to the mission room in search of Kotetsu, but stopped to say hello to Kakashi. "Kakashi, how are you?" the cheerful Chunin asked. "Good, been training my team and all." He tried to keep it short, and by the look on Izumo's face, he had caught on. Izumo smiled back in response, trying not to look peeved at the obvious dismissal. "Okay then, just tell Naruto not to overdo it. He's been leaving the village a lot to train just like you told him to. He said you've been giving him a pretty rigorous training schedule and all." Walking away from the still Junin, Izumo gave him a small wave before disappearing behind the mission room door. Kakashi stood in the same spot, book forgotten as he analyzed the last statement. Kakashi was tempted to ask his fellow shinobi what exactly he meant, but decided not to in case any suspicion or rumors arose from it. He hadn't given Naruto a training schedule, and he never told Naruto to leave the village to train on this so-called schedule. Kakashi stuffed his book away. This was curious behavior, and while he wasn't about to start tailing his student, he did feel like checking the gate records. When exactly did this start happening, Naruto? Making his way out of the nearest window, Kakashi ran to the main gate to go investigate. Now that he thought of it, Naruto had been looking more tired the past few weeks. Halting at the stall where two Chunin were sitting, he asked if he could see the records for the past 2 months. Showing his ID, Kakashi grabbed the scrolls and leaned on a post by the village entrance. This wouldn't take long. He pulled the scrolls open, skimming through the name of the people who had left and entered the village. His fingers stopped each time he saw Naruto's name, taking note of the days the blonde genin left. After about 20 minutes, Kakashi closed the scrolls and set them aside. Naruto had been leaving the village the past 2 months several times a week, but it wasn't until a month ago did this become more frequent. The first month, Naruto's name only appeared twice a week, but now, the boy's name was written down almost every day. And while Kakashi would have been proud of his student for training, he found it strange that Naruto would lie about the reason. Was he really training? Because if he was, why would he make up a fake story just to leave? Kakashi returned the scrolls to the Chunin, and swiftly walked away. Stuffing his gloved hands into his pants, Kakashi thought about how he was going to go about this. Should I ask straight out, or follow him? Naruto tossed and turned in his bed, successfully kicking off the sheets. His face was tense and beaded with a light sheen of sweat. His breath quickened, and one small teardrop escaped from his closed eyelid before he jolted awake. Naruto's hand was extended out in front of him. His eyes darted around him, almost searching for someone or trying to find evidence for something. He retracted his hand, and let it fall into his lap. Staring at the palm of his hand, Naruto's brows creased together in confusion. What exactly was he reaching out to? He tried desperately to remember his dream, but the only thing he could recall was the peals of laughter ringing in his head. He looked out his window, the sun peeking back over Konoha and giving his home a beautiful glow. His eyes softened. How would it look from the Hokage office? It was a question that would often slip into his thoughts on mornings such as these. He wanted it so badly. To be respected and to protect everyone he loves. To love your home with everything you had, and be loved just as deeply. His heart clenched at the thought. He knew that it would be a tough dream to achieve, but he was Naruto Uzumaki, and he never gave up or went back on his word. Naruto was positive that one day, he'd be the leader of Konoha, and he'd be the best there ever was. Rubbing the sleep out of his eyes, he flopped back onto his bed and stretched his back and legs. The next 3 days, Naruto and the other genin would have to train by themselves. All the Junin and Anbu were having a physical and psychological examination, which was ordered by Tsunade. She firmly stated that it was a necessary procedure, and it was something that should be done more than just once a year. Just in the past month, 2 Junin and 5 Anbu collapsed from malnutrition and chakra exhaustion. Needless to say, many of the shinobi were not happy to be told that they couldn't take care of themselves. Even if it was true, Naruto chuckled at how much trouble Kakashi was probably going to cause. He doubted his teacher would let the doctors and nurses poke and prod him so easily. He was tempted to have an appointment himself, what with the Kyuubi making a huge ruckus in his head. The fox kept on yelling about staying away from Uchihas, but as far as Naruto knew, Sasuke wasn't about to put a kunai in his back, and Itachi hadn't been spotted around Konohagakure, right? He wasn't sure if any of the older shinobi would tell him even if they did spot the Uchiha brother, anyway. Atsushi would probably know though, because he looked like the kind of ninja who knew everything that was going on before anyone did. Naruto wasn't sure what day Atsushi was having his checkup, so he was pretty clueless with what to do for the day. Shrugging his shoulders, Naruto got to work at getting ready. He pulled on the new set of clothes, shooting his pile of orange clothes an almost longing look. Looking himself in the mirror, he scrunched his nose in frustration, and grabbed his orange jacket. It didn't matter how caught up in the moment he was in when Ino bought him the new articles of clothing, he would always love orange in the end. Feeling more comfortable in the orange jacket, he warmed himself some ramen, and wolfed it down. After wiping the soup from his lips, Naruto slipped on his shoes and headed towards the valley. He wasn't expecting the black-haired boy to be there, but it was a good place to train, even if it was a little farther off from the village. He was about to exit the gate, but was stopped by Izumo and Katetsu, the most frequently stationed gate watchers. "Hey, Naruto, training alone isn't always the best. You should get a partner. We're technically not allowed to let genin out of the village this often without another ninja to go with them." Izumo yelled, successfully catching Naruto's attention. "Oh well, I do have someone I practice with. He just doesn't always leave Konoha at the same time as me." Scratching the back of his head, he mentally cursed at almost mentioning Atsushi. But he did congratulate himself for the quick response. "Really? Well, that's great. Just don't stay out too long. Some hunter nins caught traces of what might be a missing nin lurking around. Be careful," Katetsu called out as Naruto jogged out of the huge wooden doors. Naruto frowned at the last comment. Maybe he shouldn't stay out so late. Casting the thought away, he was confident he would be able to beat the missing nin, or at least hold he or her off long enough to escape. He took his time traveling away from Konoha. It was early morning, so he had a lot of time to kill and he felt like a light run would be an adequate warm-up, too. Plus the day was turning out pretty awesome. The weather was perfect, and he had all day to do what he wanted to do. Naruto chuckled at the thought. When he was still in the academy, a statement like that usually led to pranks and mayhem, but it was so different now. Naruto thought he did a pretty bang-up job making himself the person he was today. It probably would have been easier if he had more support growing up, but in the end, he didn't regret it because it made him the person he was today. "Naruto, is that you?" a voice called out from the trees. "What a minute. Atsushi, is that you?" Naruto said. He trotted over to where the voice had come from and found Atsushi leaning on an old oak. He was holding his side tightly, and Naruto could vaguely see red liquid dripping from in between his fingers. "Oh no, we have to get you to the hospital." Naruto rushed forward and held Atsushi, almost toppling over when his masked friend stumbled from his tilted position on the tree. Naruto's eyes finally took in the ripped clothes, and what looked like charred skin all over his body. Atsushi gave a choked cough, blood dripping out of his mask. Naruto panicked, stuttering reassurances, and trying to drag his friend back to Konoha. His chest felt tight and his heart weighed down. He had only felt this scared and helpless when he thought Haku had killed Sasuke. Naruto gave a cry of distress when Atsushi gave another watery cough, sending them both to the ground. Naruto. I cough can't go to Konoha." Atsushi's breath became more labored and heavy, the illusion around the mouth of the mask flickering from the chakra draining out of his body. "What do you mean? You need help." Atsushi pulled away from Naruto, almost crawling backwards. The illusion around the mask now completely gone. Naruto saw the thick drops of blooding erupting from Atsushi's lips, but what scared him even more was the blood that looked like it was pouring from higher up the mask. "You're bleeding to death. What do you expect me to do?" Naruto was covered in blood, a wild frightened look plastered on his face. "What do you fucking expect me to do?" Atsushi motioned for Naruto to come closer, causing the blonde boy to practically scrabble to his side. Naruto bent of him, watching Atsushi gasping for air and coughing but even more blood. Naruto reached for the mask, so he could help Atsushi, with the blood starting to choke him to death. In one swift motion, Atsushi bit into Naruto's extended arm. Naruto yelled in pain, his heart racing as he felt the teeth in his arm shift. He tried pulling away, but the iron grip holding him and Naruto's desperation kept him from really struggling away. Hot tears dripped from his face, as he felt a good amount of chakra move into his arm and seep out of his body. Naruto felt dizzy, the edges of his vision blurring. His body went slack as the teeth removed themselves from his arm. The technique isn't really suited to most shinobi's bodies, since you have to be a sensor-type shinobi, but luckily I'm skilled enough to do it with most other people. Naruto looked at him through sleepy eyes that followed the tiny rivers of his and Atsushi's blood running down the boy's mouth and off his chin. His ears sounded like they had cotton in them, and he could barely hear Atsushi continuing to speak to him. Unfortunately, it can't heal all my wounds completely, and it affects you, too. I'm sorry. Naruto nodded. He was relieved that Atsushi wasn't in a fatal condition anymore, but slightly creeped out about being bitten. His eyes drooped even lower, and Naruto frowned even more when he saw a red flow of liquid still dripping from higher up the mask, which was covered. He fell on top of Atsushi and felt arms circle around him. It better not leave a mark. Naruto blacked out, too spent to even keep himself awake to hear Atsushi's response. Atsushi staggered onto his feet and held Naruto to him. Shifting his arm position, he got Naruto into a secure grip, and slowly made his way to the village so as not to open up the half-healed wounds. He walked little by little for what seemed like hours, alternating from walking on a marked path, off the trail. The sun was still high in the sky, and getting into Konoha at this time of day without detection was slightly harder, but with Naruto unconscious, it might prove to be a challenge for him. His eyes burned slightly, and he could feel the pressure of the seal put on him pushing against his eyes. Taking deep breaths, Atsushi tried to ward off the churning feeling bubbling in his stomach. A coat of cold sweat broke out all over his body, and he had to place Naruto down, so he could sit down and hope for the queasiness to go away. Not being able to take it any longer, Atsushi flipped off his mask and vomited on the ground, his long hair sadly caught in the mix. Too pained to really care, Atsushi pulled out a kunai, severed it off, and tossed it onto the ground. Breathing through his mouth, he dry heaved a few times and clutched his stomach. He struggled to keep himself standing, almost falling to his knees from the fatigue. A few minutes passed, and it was all over, leaving him only light-headed and feverish. Making sure to at least burn the evidence of him ever being there, Atsushi fixed his mask back into place, and picked Naruto up again. How much he wished he had his eyesight back. He was a fool to sacrifice so much for so little, and in the end he was going back to Konoha in some form or another. Did Naruto look pained? Did he have a peaceful expression on his face? Atsushi only held on to the memory of what the small boy looked like now. It was like an old graying photo. Everything was dull, and the faces were getting harder and harder to see as the days passed. How long had it been? A year? Wandering around in darkness, and only holding on to faint images of what was supposed to be there. Atsushi sighed. It was strange how what he thought was his most precious thing dimmed in comparison to Naruto. Again and again it was Naruto. He carefully lifted a finger to touch the headband on his head while still carrying the other boy. The blue cloth attached to the metal plate had always been his. From the first day he had become a genin, it was never replaced. The metal plate barring the Konoha symbol was not. His real one had a scratched line through it, but he hadn't kept it. When he woke up a year ago to find himself wandering the land blindly, the only things he had were the clothes on his back, and the headband clutched in his hand. It was like starting all over again. Learning how to walk, and communicate. And then how to sense things and fight. He wasn't a genius for nothing, but that didn't mean it wasn't the most difficult task he ever had to accomplish. Atsushi could hear the sounds of Konoha 20 minutes later. He carefully slithered through the underbrush, and held onto Naruto securely. He only had a little bit of chakra left. Maybe only enough to make one clone, and then teleport them a short distance, but for that to be possible, he needed to be a few yards closer. Holding Naruto closer, Atsushi went through the necessary hand seals, and set a Naruto clone to the front desk to check himself in. While the clone passed through the door, Atsushi waited for the two guarding ninja to turn their heads, and then tossed himself inside Konoha walls. Flashing through more hand signs, he held onto Naruto tightly, and teleported them both to Naruto's apartment. Unfortunately, Atsushi only got them to the alley that was to the left of Naruto's apartment, so he had to somehow get them up the stairs without being seen. Seeing as going on the main road to take the stairs wasn't going to work, Atsushi shuffled to the back of the apartment and jumped to the back door. Easily opening up the old and rusty lock, Atsushi stepped in and carried the blonde boy to his bedroom. Placing him on the bed, his feet buckled beneath him, and Atsushi laid halfway on Naruto's bed. Too tired to really clean himself off, he dragged himself closer to the other boy so that they were both curled up on the small bed together. He stared blankly forward, his bare fingers lightly tracing shapes into Naruto's back. He pulled the boy closer, holding onto him like a lifeline, and burying his face into the soft spiky hair. Breathing in Naruto's scent, he sighed for the millionth time. "I'm sorry, and thank you." He felt something stir from behind his eyes as he said these words. Snapping his eyes open, he thought he saw the color of Naruto's hair, but marked it off as imagination while all he saw was darkness again. Kakashi sat in the waiting room to get his checkup. He was currently scratching Pakun behind his ears and staring off in front of him. There were reports of a missing nin being seen around Konoha, and while this meant someone got to investigate and probably take the person down, a favorite type of mission for higher-level ninja, he was more worried about Naruto. His youngest student was training all the time outside the village, so what if the missing nin was from Akatsuki, and one of the members was watching the boy? But if it was Akatsuki, then they probably would have grabbed Naruto by now, right? Kakashi was also aware that several of the members of Akatsuki purposefully made catching the victim harder just because it was fun and challenging. It sickened Kakashi just thinking about it, and he felt Obito's eye twitch in agreement. "Are you okay, Kakashi?" The white-haired man looked down at his smallest dog. The dog was looking at him in concern, obviously feeling the confusion and concentration rolling off his master. Kakashi started to scratch in Pug's ears again. "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm just going to check up on Naruto after I get this over with." Sneezing in agreement, Pakun closed his eyes, puffed back to the rest of the dogs, and left Kakashi to his own thought. Kakashi shook his head. Maybe he was worrying too much, but he just had this gut feeling that he was missing something major. "Kakashi Hitaki, please report to room 117A. Hearing the nurse call his name, Kakashi got out of the chair he was sitting in and strolled over to the designated room. He normally would have caused some trouble for whoever was going to do all the test, but he was too distracted to really pay much attention to his lack of response. His examination ended quickly, and he only listened with half an ear when the nurse told him to come back the next day for a psych analysis. Exiting the hospital, he decided to see if Naruto was home or not. There was a big chance that the genin was off training, and if that ended up being true, then Kakashi would try talking to the boy tomorrow. Mapping his way through the familiar streets, he calmly walked up to Naruto's front door. Knocking on the door several times, he was only met with silence. He was about to give up, when a thought popped into the Junin's head. He could check the bedroom window to see if Naruto was in there or something, and if not, then the copy nin would just go home. Hopping onto the balcony railing, he leaned forward and looked in through the bedroom window. Hopping onto the balcony railing, Kakashi leaned forward and looked in through the bedroom window. Eyes widening in alarm, Kakashi launched himself towards the dirty window and shattered it open. Upon his entrance, the blood-covered figure sprung away from the bed. Kakashi had to breathe through his mouth because of the smell. It was a mix of vomit, blood and slightly burnt flesh, he was sure, and by the looks of it, it was coming from the figure in front of him. The other man's hair was uneven and wild, and his clothes ripped and stained beyond repair. What really worried him though was that Naruto was dirty with blood too. Whether or not it was any of his own, Kakashi didn't know. "You're the ninja that's been sneaking around this place, aren't you? What do you want with Naruto?" Both the masked shinobi moved slowly around each other, calculating the other's move. Kakashi glanced over at Naruto before settling himself in a defensive mode. Grunting in frustration, Atsushi moved towards Kakashi, his pace slower than usual because of fatigue and blood loss. Both males rushed towards each other, a fire jutsu already flying through the air. Kakashi dodged to the side, the jutsu colliding with the wall and causing an explosion. Rock, metal, wires and pipes flew into the air in a mix of dust and smoke. Through the cover, Atsushi gave Naruto one last glance before stumbling away through the now massive hole in the wall. Kakashi ran to the side of the building and inspected the area to see if the mysterious missing nin was still nearby, but was disappointed to only see a crowd of civilians and ninja. For a man that looked like he was about to drop dead at any second, he sure made a quick escape. Kakashi frowned under his mask, but turned his concentration to a group of ninja that had hopped onto the destroyed ledge, serious looks displayed on their faces. "Hitaki, is there anything we can do? What happened? The reported missing nin just left the area. I'm not sure he is still in Konoha, but he has black hair, a porcelain mask, and looks like he just dragged himself out of a shredder. Find him, but don't kill him." The men dipped their heads in a signal of understanding and zoomed off in different directions. Grabbing a hold of the unconscious blonde, Kakashi held him in his arms to take him to the hospital. He felt like he should be the one going after the strange male, but something told him that the man wasn't going to be found just yet, and he had an obligation to his youngest student. Kakashi leapt over the buildings, an iron-like grip on Naruto. If anyone had seen him pass over them, they would only catch a glimpse of a blur of colors, which could easily be mistaken for a trick of the light. Sighing in relief as he saw the roof of the hospital, he jogged into the front door. Giving Naruto to the doctors, they started checking him for major wounds. The medics placed him on a stretcher, leaving Kakashi to fill out the paperwork. Kakashi stared down at the hallway Naruto was carted through. He couldn't help but thinking that his encounter with the other shinobi was more than what is seemed, and that life was about to get a whole lot more difficult. Naruto dragged his feet through the sewer water in the depths of his mind. It wasn't that often Naruto was drawn to the Kyuubi's cage by force. Usually the fox hated seeing him, but lately he seemed to be screaming about something. Slipping into the last corridor, Naruto came face to face with the barred enclosure that held his furry little friend. Coming closer to the sealed bars, Naruto made sure he was at least a claw's distance before calling out the demon. Waiting for a reply, he squinted his eyes in an effort to see into the dark cage. "Human scum, I warned you about staying away from the Uchiha." Naruto jumped back in fright, the sudden noise scaring him more than he would care to admit. Shaking it off, Naruto stood a little taller. "Sasuke has done nothing to you." Naruto stood his ground as the Kyuubi roared. The fox began to pace the cage in an irritated manner. "You do not understand, mortal fool. I don't have to listen to this. Whatever grudge you have on the Uchiha will not be dealt with through me. Fuck off, furball." Naruto rolled his eyes and started to walk away. He placed his hands over his ears to block out the barking coming from the Kyuubi. He could hear snippets of what his tenant was yelling, but only separate words like village, leave, trouble, Uchiha. Naruto shook his head and pushed himself out of his inner landscape. He felt a little disoriented at first, but he was able to force himself into consciousness. The first thing he could hear was the faint sound was someone talking. "Ruto? He's waking up." Naruto lifted his arm and rubbed his eyes. From the odor filling his nose, he could tell he was in the hospital, but besides being a little tired, Naruto felt perfectly fine. Stretching his arms above his head, he opened his eyes to see his team and Kakashi beside his hospital bed. Sakura smiled at him, giving a small wave. "Glad you're finally awake, Naruto. We were worried about you. While you were out we tried cleaning your apartment, but your room wasn't just covered in rubble. Nice assortment of ramen cups you have." Kakashi finished off. Sasuke just smirked and muttered "Dobi" under his breath, a relieved glimmer in his eyes. Naruto was happy to see the concern from his usually evasive teammate. But it was astoundingly different nowadays. The past few weeks had been practically the definition of an oxymoron. Between Atsushi, Sasuke and everyone else, Naruto had more than enough surprises to last him a while. "Do you remember anything that happened from before?" Kakashi questioned. "In all truth, I don't even know why I'm in here. All I remember is, nothing." Naruto, catching himself before his tongue slipped, scratched the back of his head nervously. "So how long have I been here anyway?" Sasuke shifted a bit onto his left foot before speaking. "Maybe a few hours, not that long. The doctors said you had chakra exhaustion, but nothing else. Once again you made a quick recovering." Naruto smiled at that. He was glad that even though he pissed off the fox a lot, the demon had no way to stop Naruto's body from naturally using his chakra to heal and recuperate. Kakashi was about to speak when a group of Junin came in. They wore long black trench coats and had dark circles under their eyes. Anyone who knew anyone could tell they were obviously a part of the torture and interrogation unit led by Ibiki Morino. We'll have to interrupt here. Naruto Uzumaki is required to come in for questioning. We have permission from the medics to take him as soon as he's dressed. Kakashi nodded his head hesitantly, leading the two other genin out the door. Sasuke shot Naruto a slightly confused glance before flicking his head in a talk-to-you-later fashion. Something Naruto could easily understand because of his long hours as Sasuke's shinobi partner on missions. Sasuke, Sakura and Kakashi were all irritated at being pulled away from their teammate and friend just as he woke up, but there was nothing they could do about it. Naruto opened up the hospital closet and slipped on a pair of clothes from his apartment. Compliments of one of his teammates or teacher. Tugging on his shoes, he gave the Junin a fox-like grin before jogging out the door with them. So are you going to take me to Anbu headquarters or something? The Junin all looked at each other, a grim expression stretched across their faces. Not unless you have something to hide. You aren't going to keep anything from us, are you, Uzumaki? Naruto's heart stilled for a moment before beating back to normal, making sure to bob his head up and down. Naruto may be naive sometimes, but he could tell that those Junin knew more than they were letting on. It didn't take too long for them to arrive. The real T&I headquarters was a part of Anbu HQ, which happened to be behind the Hokage Memorial, but the building Naruto was being led to was a less serious place of investigation. It was still behind the mountain, but it wasn't as hidden or large as the genuine thing. Naruto was left in a room with a couple of Junin and what looked like off-duty Anbu. Ah, Naruto Uzumaki, nice to meet you. We haven't formally met, but I watched your match against Neji during the Chunin exams. Impressive. Naruto sat across from the shinobi that spoke, but the rest of the shinobi were scattered around the room. Some were leaning on the walls or sitting in chairs placed in random places around the room. Right, thanks I guess. Sue, what do you want to know? Naruto said nervously. Well, what exactly is your involvement with this man? One of the Anbu pulled out a drawn photo of Atsushi. The picture looked just like him with the mask and everything. Staring down at the penciled image, Naruto picked it up and inspected it. Never seen the guy. Is he a friend of yours? The Junin frowned in disappointment. Now Naruto, we know that you know a little more than that. I have no idea what you're talking about. One of the Anbu in the room pushed himself off the wall, and placed a hand on the table between them. He's lying, believe me, I can tell. Uzumaki, we have no idea where this man came from or what he wants with the village. This missing nin has been sneaking around and you're the closest lead we have. Naruto sunk in his chair. Missing nin? That wasn't possible. If he was one, why has he been hanging around so long without doing anything? But he still couldn't say anything about it, not without giving too much information. Uzumaki, why are you hiding something? Do you want us to drag you to Ibiki to pry the answers out of you? He won't go easy on you just because you're a genin. Naruto shivered at the attention he was getting. Everyone in the room was practically trying to rip the answers out of him with their eyes. As the silence continued, Naruto started to feel scared. Sure, he had a few run-ins with the Anbu and Junin of the village because he had somewhat of a hero complex and would butt in when he could, but never when he was the object of most their concentration. Not good. I really don't know anything. I just went out for some training and came back. Before he could even take a breath after his sentence, the Junin's eyes suddenly sharpened, and he grabbed the front of his shirt. Dragging Naruto onto his feet, the Junin brought Naruto close to his face, which looked a little too similar to a demon's at the moment. His smile was creepy, and Naruto could feel a tinge of killer intent swirling in the air. Really not good. Please, Naruto, don't insult my intelligence. We talked to the guard at the gate, and he said you never came back. And there were leaves in your hair that only come from trees outside of the village. Now tell us what you know. I don't know what you mean. It got really silent in the room as the Junin softly placed Naruto down. Turning around, it only took the twitch of his head before two Anbu seized Naruto. My patience has run out, take him to HQ. I know he's hiding something. Naruto struggled, yelling in protest. He'd heard stories about it and that's all that needed to get him to believe that T&I was the worst place possible in the entire hidden village. He even went as far as adding the Kyuubi's chakra to get the two Anbu to let go, but that only made them tighten their grip. Twisting his body back and forth, he could only see a blur of images. The two Anbu leapt into the air and over a steep ledge, and Naruto felt his stomach flop at the sudden drop. Naruto heard a bang before the sunlight was blocked by the two doors of headquarters. In the rush, Naruto was thrown into a room and buckled onto a metal table. Everything was happening all so fast. How was everything going so wrong in the blink of an eye? One moment he was surrounded by friends in a hospital room, and the next he was about to be probed by the spooks and mind diggers of Konoha. His head was roughly lifted, and a blindfold was placed over his eyes. I don't think I really have to inform you, Mr. Uzumaki, but as an official ninja of this village, holding out information that could possibly help the village from an unknown attacker puts you in a tight position. And since you've been a genin for more than a year, it gives T and I consent to go as far as torturing you an inch from death to get the answers we want. So, start talking. Naruto gritted his teeth. It was already a confusing situation. He saw Atsushi's headband, but he could have stolen it. No, that's wrong. There was just no way. Naruto kept his mouth shut, but he could feel his body start to shake a little. He felt vulnerable too with the blindfold. Was this how Atsushi felt every day? Concentrating on the other figure in the room, he could hear the faint sigh and the clinking of something metal. Fine, stubbornness isn't the best trait to show right about now. Naruto tensed his muscles for the impact, but suddenly the door slammed open. Stand down. Who authorized this? Danzo Shimura, sir. He told to. It doesn't matter anymore. Leave. Naruto listened as the first pair of feet exited the room. Naruto felt the hooks around his wrists and ankles come loose, and he sighed in relief. Jumping off the metal table, Naruto slipped of the cloth around his eyes, and looked at his savior. Wait, I know you. You're Ino's dad. You were never meant to leave the previous investigation room, but you are still in a bad position. It seems the council has found this chance to expose the evils of Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto, the council will go as far as naming you a traitor of the village. Would you risk that just for Atsushi? Naruto's head snapped to meet his face, and pointed his finger. Whoa whoa whoa, how do you know his name? Cursing out loud, Ino's dad hanged himself, and when the smoke cleared, Atsushi appeared before him. His appearance was still disheveled, and his clothes were still in the same condition. Look, Naruto, it's not safe for you in the village anymore. What are you talking about? Atsushi gave a snort of aggravation. Look, I'm sorry to get you involved in all this, but your involvement with me has made you susceptible to attacks from the council. Let's leave the village. A look of horror crossed Naruto's face. He nervously stepped back, his shoulder brushing the wall next to him. I can't do that. I'm going to be Hokage one day, and I gotta stick to the village even when things get rough. Kami, Naruto, open your eyes. You're not going to be Hokage from within a jail cell. You have no idea how manipulative and cruel the higher powers of this village can be. It's not safe. You're not making any sense. Atsushi slammed his hand on the wall, and his head was face down, casting a shadow over his pale white mask. You'll thank me for this later. Dobi. Naruto didn't even have time to fully understand the last statement before Atsushi pushed down on some pressure points. Atsushi caught Naruto before he fell to the floor and held him close. Deep inside him, he knew that this really wasn't the best solution, but he still hated the Hidden Leaf for what they did to him, no matter how much he had learned in the past few months. Atsushi heard footsteps approaching, one of them being the distinct sound of heels on cement. And there were only two women who wore heels and came down here, and neither of those choices was better than the other. Making sure that Naruto was secure in his arms, Atsushi ran the opposite direction. He was almost out of Anbu headquarters, when he heard yells and orders being shouted. Cursing loudly, he added chakra to his feet, no longer worried with covering his chakra signature. Atsushi bolted out of the doors and body flickered towards the forest behind the Hokage memorial. No need going through the village. Atsushi didn't know how long he had been running. He was sure the bottoms of his feet, although calloused, were bleeding from the friction. Several hours? A day or two? At this point, he really didn't care. He sent a wave of chakra around the area to see if the Anbu were still following him, and he was thankful that they weren't. He was almost near an abandoned watchtower, built in the last war, bordering fire country and wind country. He knew he overstayed his visit at the village, and it cost him and Naruto. Looking down at the sleeping boy, he couldn't help but want to be selfish. It was his greatest flaw and had cost him so much throughout his life. His friends, his loyalty, his humanity, his sanity, and his eyesight. But even now, Naruto was the only thing he hadn't lost. That was why he would never let go, ever. Naruto would understand. He always did. Hey, hand that over, bastard. Naruto threw a well-aimed Rasengan towards Atsushi. The stone wall that separated the room from the hallway crumbled to the ground. Something he wished the outer walls would do. Naruto had found out pretty quickly that the fortress walls were pretty much jutsu repellent, so unless he had super fists like Tsunade, he was so out of luck. It had been like this for a week. Naruto would find some sort of weapon or sharp object to help him lock his way out. The only sensible way out were the locked doors and windows, and Atsushi would catch him before he did anything. Sometimes jutsus would fly, and sometimes just insults. Naruto, for the love of Atsushi, impatiently tugged at his still unevenly cut cropped hair, some of the strands ripping from their roots. Looking at his hand with what Naruto assumed was disgust. The mask is on his face, remember? Atsushi shook the hairs off his gloved hand and trudged off. He made sure to slam the door behind him, leaving Naruto somewhat pleased with annoying his captor for the 20th time that week. Naruto couldn't help but feel like Atsushi was one of the worst jailers in the history of captors. He would let Naruto do just about anything, except leave, of course. Naruto crossed his arms in frustration and hopped onto the bed in the room he was staying in. Things really couldn't get that much worse. He was still waiting on the day he thanked Atsushi, because it didn't look like it was happening anytime soon. The village probably thought he went all missing nin traitor on them. Kami, what did Sasuke think? Inner Naruto Theater. Sasuke stood, his back to Naruto. His head was down, but when he turned around, Sasuke's Sharingan eyes were twirling madly. Naruto, you're the worst. Lower than my brother. You're not fit to be my rival. And to think I actually fell in low. Okay, so maybe that would never happen. Naruto tossed and turned on the king-sized bed. There really wasn't that much to do. Getting bored of just laying around, Naruto bounced out of bed and jogged toward the hole in the wall. Checking the hallways for any signs of Atsushi, Naruto made his way to the kitchen. It wasn't that big, maybe even smaller than the one in his own apartment. But Naruto expected as much from an abandoned building that was meant for watching for surprise attacks and all. It's not like they were going to make a souffle in the middle of a war. He suspected that his masked friend had probably fixed the place up, or had been here before because the place wasn't covered with much dust. Hoisting himself up on the wooden counter, he searched for any food that he could warm up in a few minutes. Rustling through the cabinets, Naruto was sadly disappointed to see only 3 cups of instant ramen left in the cupboard. I am not getting you anymore. Naruto, caught off guard, slipped from his bent position on top of the kitchen counter. Closing his eyes and tensing his muscles, Naruto prepared himself from the pain that would follow the impact. But he was greatly surprised to feel 2 arms wrapped around his waist and his back firmly planted on what felt like a strong, muscular chest. Snapping his eyes open, he was met with an ocean of black material that came from the dark-haired boy's shirt. I don't need your help. Naruto roughly pushed himself off of Atsushi, a blush lightly dusted across his scarred cheeks. And why the hell not? You take me from my home and lock me in a fucking tower. The very least you can do is get me the food I want. And will you please fix your hair? You look creepy with it like that. Atsushi was completely silent as Naruto continued to rant. The blonde-haired boy would point at random objects in the room, screaming about breaking out of the place and getting some better ramen service. And somehow, he found a way to avoid actually looking at Atsushi. Yes, this was going to be a hell of a time. So there's no trace of him yet? Kurenai murmured to Asuma. She rubbed her palm against her forearm, sneaking nervous glances at their distressed students. The genin waited anxiously for an answer from Asuma. After the mysterious missing nin had swiped Naruto right from under their noses, Tsunade had set up 2 teams of shinobi to find him. One team would go out and try to find any tracks left behind, and the other stayed in the village to investigate the case. Unfortunately, there was little to go by and even less to find. They couldn't even use the blood found on the sheets of Naruto's bed because when they went back to go get it, all traces of the red substance had been completely wiped off of all the surfaces. The only thing we've got is the video from the security camera. And the only thing that really proves is that Naruto didn't leave the village willingly. I'm actually only allowed to reveal this information because some of the other ninja agree that if we are going to find anything about Naruto's connection to this man, then it would be through the people that spend the most time around him. Was Naruto acting strangely or possessed anything out of the ordinary before this incident? Everyone shook his or her head. Kakashi looked at the genin with a heavy heart. It wasn't easy losing a teammate, and Kakashi hoped that they would be able to find Naruto soon before anything really bad happened. Wait a minute, well, maybe not, but… All eyes swiveled towards Sakura, who looked a little more hopeful than before. Sasuke glanced up from his perch on the window. His eyes glared up at Sakura. The dark rings under his eyes easily indicated that Sasuke had most likely spent nights looking for clues on what happened to Naruto. Spit it out already. Needless to say, most the room was pretty tense and nervous, with the irritable Uchiha glaring holes into their backs. Sakura blushed with embarrassment before continuing her previous thought. Alright guys, do you remember a while back when we were waiting on the bridge and Naruto fell into the river? He had that necklace with him. He said it was important or something. Kiba broke out into a large smile and pumped his hand into the air. Ah yeah, we are actually getting somewhere now. We'll find Naruto in no time. The room started to brighten up, but the mood was killed when Ino immediately twisted around to face the crowd. Don't be stupid, billboard brow. That necklace was given to Naruto by Sasuke. She clamped her hand over her mouth as everyone wore shocked expressions. I'm so sorry, Sasuke. I didn't mean to tell. Sasuke looked at Ino like she had lost her mind, a perplexed expression inking its way onto his face. I thought you gave that necklace to Naruto? Aren't you seeing each other? Head swung back to look at Ino to confirm this new information, but she only shook her head, everyone more confused than they were before. Shikamaru looked at everyone silently, before voicing out the question on everyone's mind. So if Sasuke didn't give the necklace to Naruto, and Ino didn't either, then who did? Kakashi closed his eye in thought, Obito's eye twitching from under the headband. Suddenly his heart skipped a beat, and he cursed rather loudly, drawing the room's attention to him. Asuma, did your team check Naruto's gate record? Yeah, we checked the past few days. Why? Brushing a gloved hand over one of the many pockets in his flak jacket, Kakashi took out a small scroll. Opening up the scroll, he placed it on the table and beckoned everyone over. Even Sasuke approached the edge of the table to see what Kakashi had to offer. Kakashi pointed at the calendar he had assembled on Naruto's training habits. As he explained, he directed their attention to different parts of the calendar. I was told a few weeks ago that Naruto had been spending a lot of time outside the village training. At first it didn't bother me, but then one of the gate guards told me it was because Naruto was following my new training plans. I never gave him a training plan. I looked through the records of the past few weeks on when Naruto left the village. You can see that there's a huge difference in the amount of time from these weeks and the weeks following. That was when the missing nin was first reported, Asuma said quietly. Sasuke tugged at his hair, trying to get all the information straight. So that means that either when Naruto started training more, it brought the missing nin out, or Naruto was leaving the village because of the shinobi. Kakashi finished. The room got really silent, as they mulled over the new ideas and thoughts. There was no way Naruto would betray the village. He wanted to be Hokage for heaven's sake. This might sound strange, but what if the necklace came from the missing nin? Shino said. This person seems to be the only one left that we know of that might have done it. Well, if that's the case. Ino rummaged through her bag of things. She pulled at a tiny bag of trinkets and pulled out what looked like the remains of part of a metal chain. This came off of Naruto's necklace. I had to cut some of it off when I fixed it for him. She carefully handed it to Asuma, who rolled it in his hands a few times before thanking his student. Taking out a bag, he placed it in there, and then stuffed it into one of the pockets of his pants. Checking the time, he excused himself from the room. After Asuma left the room, the other occupants left to do their own thing. Sasuke slowly made his way through the bustling streets of the village. Looking to his right, where Naruto would usually walk, he was only met with the sight of more shops and people. Getting frustrated, Sasuke leapt up onto the rooftops and back to the Uchiha clan compound. Naruto, where are you? Naruto sat at the small table across from Atsushi. He was humming the tune of a song he couldn't remember the name of, while he watched the other man polish a long sharp sword. The encounter they had the previous day in the kitchen still hung in the air, unresolved and still open for discussion. No, why not? It's just a food. It's probably the reason why you're a few inches shorter than everyone else your age. Is not. It is. Is not. I am not starting this. End of discussion. If you want ramen, then beat me in a match. Then maybe I'll think about it. Bastard. You're so going to regret ever taking me. Launching himself at Atsushi, he pulled his fist back and swung it forward. Atsushi easily grabbed onto the fist and slung him over his shoulder. Taking the sword, he carried the squirming Naruto into what looked like an inside training ground. Tossing Naruto onto the ground, Atsushi walked to the center of the area. For the next few hours, Naruto pushed himself to land even the smallest of scratches on him, but by the end of the day, he was only tired and disheartened. Naruto lay sprawled out on the dirt floor. Atsushi sat by his head, dusting the dirt off his pants. Look, Naruto. Konoha is not what you think it is. It's corrupt and only holds an image of good things, but it's not. If I wanted to leave the place, then I would have a long time ago. I should know how harsh and unfair it is in the village, but I also know that it's home and there are good things, too. Atsushi only stared in his direction, tapping a finger lightly on his bent knee. He sighed quietly while bopping his blonde companion on the head. If you love it there so much, then work harder to find an escape. Naruto looked at Atsushi through the corner of his eye. The heavy feeling that had been weighing down on his heart the past few days was slowly easing up for reasons Naruto couldn't explain. Hey, Atsushi, I don't get it. You take me from home, but you're encouraging me to find a way to leave? I'm not holding you here because I have some sinister master plan to destroy the world. I'm merely doing what I think will benefit the most. Benefit who? Not saying anything, Atsushi pushed himself off the ground and held out a hand for Naruto to take. Looking at the black-gloved hand, Naruto hesitantly grabbed it and pulled himself up. Wiping the sweat off his forehead, Naruto looked up at Atsushi's mask. Scratching the back of his head and holding his side from a small cramp he started to feel, Naruto sneaked a peek at Atsushi. Whistling quietly, he tried to act nonchalant. So now that I'm stuck with you, I think I need to at least know your real name. Or at least what you look like. I won't tell anyone. Naruto was disappointed to hear Atsushi only snort in amusement at the suggestion. Fine, if I'm not going to see your face, then let me at least fix your hair. You look like a psychopath with that haircut. This is coming from the guy who cut his hair with a kunai for most his life. At least I attempted to make it look nice. Touché. Leaving it at that, Atsushi and Naruto left the training ground and split their separate ways. Naruto was heading the opposite way before he felt a hand on his shoulder. Turning around, his eyes were covered with the familiarly covered hand. He froze as he felt a pair of lips touch his in a chaste kiss before a poof of smoke surrounded him. Atsushi, nowhere to be found. Standing in the hall, feeling kind of dizzy from the quick kiss, Naruto snapped out of his shock. How many times was that guy going to kiss him? Naruto went into his new room since his old one was sporting a hole in the wall and jumped onto the bed. Sitting crossed-legged, it only took Naruto a few seconds to full register what just happened. If anyone had passed by the door to the room, they would hear him beating the ever-loving feathers out of one of the pillows on his bed. Atsushi easily pushed the old wooden dresser aside in his room. Adding chakra into his fingers, he pressed a combination of stones on the wall, and let the stone wall move apart to reveal a long tunnel. Of course he couldn't see the tunnel, but he had gone down it several times to know that it was long. Closing the entrance behind him, Atsushi jogged down the path for a few minutes, and then stopped at dead end. Jumping up, he grabbed onto a root hanging above him and swung himself up through a hole in the that was under an illusion much like his own mask. Softly landing onto the ground above, he sent waves of chakra through the area, and after figuring out the direction he needed to go, ran that way. He ran through the trees at an easy pace, enjoying the peace and quiet while it lasted. He could tell from the direction and heat of the sun that it was almost sunset, and it made him feel a little bitter at not being able to see it. Speeding up a little bit, he stopped at the edge of a quiet little town. Sneaking through the streets, Atsushi let himself inside of a small little shop. The bell to the front door twinkled as he entered. "We're closed." "Oh, you're back." The middle-aged woman smiled fondly him, the expression not seen but felt by him. And here I thought I wouldn't be seeing you for another 5 years or something. Atsushi walked with the woman to the back of the shop, which led to her connecting house. Sitting down at the chair of her living room table, Atsushi took off his mask and long black cloak. It's nice to meet you again, Name. I actually came to ask for a favor. The older woman, or Name, set a cup of tea in front of him, and sat in the chair next to him. Might this have anything to do with the condition of your hair? Without his mask, he couldn't hide the slightly embarrassed look that flashed on his face for a moment. You don't even have to ask. You're like a son to me. Skipping over to one of the drawers in the bathroom by her, she pulled out a set of scissors, squirt bottle and so on. Dragging the chair behind Atsushi, she set to work. Name had come across him when he had first lost his eyesight. He was vulnerable and hated feeling weak. Because of this he lashed out and struggled, but Name had stood by him to provide a place to sleep when he stumbled in dead tired, and medicine when he had worn himself ragged. She never asked for anything, saying that helping him would earn her karma points. At this rate, in the next life I'll probably be a princess of something. She happily joked under her breath. They quietly chatted for a while as she fixed his hair. When he was finally done she brushed off the cut hair from his shoulder and checked the cut from side to side. It doesn't look half bad. I'm not an expert or anything, but it looks pretty hot if I do say so myself. That's a term you teens still use nowadays, right? He couldn't help but chuckle with how at ease she was around him. Feeling his silky hair cut short, he thanked her. I have to get back. Well, visit sometime soon. You're always welcome. Here's your mask. Handing him the mask, Name waved goodbye to him, and watched him disappear into the shadows of the trees outside her home. Locking the door behind her, she had no idea that she would be seeing a lot more of him than she expected. A month after Naruto's kidnapping, Sasuke was still tired, frustrated and confused. Jiraiya of the Sannin had arrived back in the village 2 weeks ago and had not left in hopes of finding something that would lead them to Naruto. There were so many holes and possibilities that surrounded Naruto's disappearance, and connecting all the dots on his own wasn't easy. He was sure that any of the other genin would have loved to help, but he doubted that they would actually be able to get anything done. Wanting to help and actually being able to help were two very different things. Between the case, normal training, his traitorous brother roaming around somewhere and dodging the councilmen and women about his estate affairs, life wasn't going to give him a break anytime soon. It definitely wasn't easy, but Sasuke had got his hands on the videotape of Naruto and the foreign nen. Compliments of the daughter of a kunoichi that worked in the security system office. He'd probably watched the video a good 30 times, and from his point of view, it was quite obvious that Naruto knew the other man. Whenever Naruto didn't know someone, and that certain someone looked suspicious, Naruto had a bad habit of pointing and yelling at them, sometimes attacking, one of his rasher characteristics. He had also convinced Kakashi to give him a copy of Naruto's gate record. All of the scrolls were strewn across the floor for him to see. He even had memorized the times with his Sharingan. Looking at the scrolls and scrolls of parchment, he couldn't help but feel a pang of disappointment in the fact that Naruto never said anything to him about this. It wasn't like they were best friends or anything, self-denial. But Naruto told him a lot, whether it was boasting or because there was no one else to talk to. He could very well tell when Naruto was upset and didn't show it. He could tell on what days he didn't have enough money for ramen and he would volunteer to pay for the day. He could tell a lot of things, but that didn't mean he had to say anything. The question was, why couldn't he tell the difference in Naruto the past few months? Sure, he had looked a little less cheerful and had gone through a major appearance do-over. But Naruto hadn't changed that much. Sasuke sighed while running his long fingers through his hair. Placing down the scroll he had in his hand, he strolled out of the house and towards the mission office. He might as well do something productive. If there was one thing Sasuke hated more than his brother, it would be staying in the Uchiha district for too long. Entering the busy room, he grabbed a C-ranked mission from a shinobi he'd never met before, avoiding Iruka who was on the other side of the room. Sasuke really didn't feel like talking to anyone, least of all Iruka. The man always had a soft spot for Naruto and Sasuke really didn't need or have the time to go through another awkward situation where neither really had anything to say. Jogging out of the room, Sasuke checked the mission requirements, and quickly headed back to his house. Packing a whole bunch of stuff in his backpack, always be prepared for everything, he rolled up and put away all the scrolls on Naruto's case before leaving again. Passing through the Uchiha compound, Sasuke wondered what it would look like once he killed his brother and revived his clan. It had been so quiet and empty for so long, Sasuke really couldn't imagine it in any other way. Shrugging off those thoughts, Sasuke walked through the busy streets of his village. The C-rank mission was a simple escort assignment for a young lady who didn't want to travel alone in fear of someone attacking her and stealing all her possessions. She wasn't particularly pretty or interesting, Sasuke thought as she saw her waiting at the front of the Konoha entrance. Approaching the young lady, Sasuke considered turning back and giving the mission to someone else when he saw that gleam in her eye. Sasuke glared at the sky for a moment, wishing for once there would be one young female who didn't look at him like a diamond ring or a piece of meat. The day that happens is the day I wear orange. So you're the one to escort me, huh? The woman obviously was blind because Sasuke was in no way happy to spend time in his day to be around her. The whole time she talked and talked to the point Sasuke wondered if she had 5 lungs crammed into her chest. As the thought strayed across his mind, Sasuke's eyes wandered in that direction. Almost stopping mid-step, Sasuke gazed at the large collection of necklaces that adorned her thin neck. Under the pile of gaudy pearls and fake crystals, Sasuke caught a glimpse of a metal chain that looked awfully familiar. "Excuse me, Miss Atsuko, I couldn't help but notice your necklaces." The woman, who looked extremely pleased with the fact that she got the handsome ninja to talk to her, lifted all the necklaces from under her yukata and continued to talk. "Oh yes, like I said before, I love going to festivals. I made it a tradition for myself to find a stand at each festival and buy or win a necklace from it." She went on and named a bunch of the villages she had traveled to, and the festivals she had attended. Sasuke listened eagerly, waiting for her to mention the silver one dangling from the very bottom of the pile. It took close to an hour for her to even get to the necklace, and by then, Sasuke's brow was twitching in irritation. This one, well, it wasn't anything that exciting. There was a festival in a little town called Gantona. It's a few miles from Konoha actually. Sasuke could not believe his luck. Uchiha didn't believe that much in destiny since that was more of a Hyuga fetish, but fate sounded like just the right word at that moment. After dropping the annoying female off at her destination, Sasuke realized that even if he ran, he would never make it back to Konoha before the sun set, so he decided that with the very limited sunlight he had left, it wouldn't hurt to go to the little town. After getting directions from a nearby merchant, Sasuke practically flew through the trees in a rush of blue and white. The trip to Gantona was rather smooth and easy, and Sasuke was able to arrive there a little bit before sunset. Walking past an outside cafe, Sasuke bought a room for one night in a hotel right next door. He mentally praised himself for memorizing the timetables of Naruto's gate record, which, if everything went as planned, suspected, would be very helpful. Yes, if everything went as planned tomorrow, finding Naruto wouldn't feel like such a faraway objective. Duck butt, huh? Your hair. Naruto and Atsushi sat together on the tatami floor having tea after a short training session. Being told that his fighting style was ineffective and improper left Naruto in a generally foul mood, so instead of taking it out on an inanimate object, Naruto targeted the only other moving figure in the tower. Not that it did anything to help with it considering Atsushi never really reacted. At least Sasuke would have reacted sometimes. So remind me again why I can't just go home. Atsushi stayed silent, just silently wiping down some shuriken that he had used during the earlier training session. The silence was strangely comforting, Naruto noted. Even with his frustration in being locked away, Naruto couldn't help but feel that familiar, at ease, sensation he got around the older boy. It was both irritating and mind-boggling for someone like Naruto. Staying in a large building with only one other occupant gave Naruto a chance to just sit and think for once. Where was the pervy sage and what was he doing? How long would he be here? And who exactly was Atsushi? Wiping some sweat off his face, Naruto placed his head on the matted floor and relaxed his muscles. The heat circulating in the room started to lull him into a soft slumber like when you fall asleep in the middle of the day and wake up right before the sun started to set. Keeping himself half awake, Naruto rubbed one of his hands in a circular motion on the tatami mat floor in a constant rhythm. Atsushi looked over at Naruto with a mix of concern and frustration. Naruto had never been this quiet before. Placing all of the shined weapons down and out of the way, Atsushi moved closer to Naruto before speaking. What do you like about Sasuke? Naruto tiredly rolled onto his stomach and glanced up at the masked figure. A faint blush appeared on his cheeks and his ears as the thought about it. Fiddling with a loose string in the tatami mat, Naruto quietly spoke, as if what he was about to say wouldn't be true if he said it too loud. It has to do with bonds, I guess. Back when we were still in the academy, I really wanted to be his friend, you know, 'cause we were similar. But I was kinda jealous with the fact that he was so much better than me at everything. Up until a few months ago, I thought that we were just rivals who would one day become great friends, but… Naruto paused, laying his arm over his eyes and half his face. He didn't know exactly why he felt the need to explain himself to someone he had known for less than a year. He couldn't even confide in Iruka, who was like an older brother to him, or Granny Tsunade, who felt like family sometimes. But then I met you, and you reminded me so much of him. And speaking to you made me start to realize things that I hadn't noticed before. Atsushi shifted uncomfortably, almost nervous to hear what Naruto was going to say next. And then I realized that the thing between Sasuke and I wasn't a crush or even love. No, I doubt that what I feel can be described as one word. Atsushi froze at the last comment. When had Naruto gotten so much insight? Was this how he was able to convince so many people to choose the right choice? Up until that moment, he had never truly and completely understood Naruto Uzumaki. At that moment, he never wanted his eyesight more. Just to see a reaction, to figure out what was going on. He wanted it so bad, so he could see Naruto's face. His hands practically shook as they reached up to grasp the mask that covered his pale, smooth face. Naruto. Hearing a clatter of something hit the ground, Naruto lifted his arm off his face to look over at the raven-haired boy across from him. His eyes automatically landed on the white porcelain mask that was discarded on the ground. He barely had any time to think before a pair of glazed-over black eyes, making them look practically gray, searched in his direction. And for the first time, Naruto saw his face and who he really was. Sasuke sat at a side table outside. He carefully watched the crowd, almost hoping to find a blonde head peeking through the masses. Sighing tiredly, he quickly ordered something before drawing his attention back to the market and the people swarming around the numerous stalls. The town was relatively small, and everyone seemed close. Vendors gave an extra apple for free, random women gossiped in the streets, and men stopped to help another with lifting boxes full of vegetables. Sasuke even had his suspicions that a large majority of the town was somehow related to one another. Getting his tomato soup, he slowly stirred as his mind wandered to the issue at hand. Can I sit here? Everywhere else is full. Sasuke glanced up to see a middle-aged man wearing an apron. Nodding his head silently, Sasuke watched as the other man pulled up a chair and gave a heavy sigh. I'm Daisuke Suo. I'm actually the owner of this cafe. He extended a hand towards Sasuke, who firmly grasped and shook it. Sasuke Uchiha. So Sasuke, I see that you're a ninja of the leaf. You here for a mission or something, or just to get away from life in the village? Sasuke was speculative about sharing his business, but after feeling the other man's chakra levels, which was just like any normal civilian, Sasuke decided he needed some information anyway and it wouldn't do any harm to have small talk. Neither actually. I'm looking for a friend of mine. Oh really? He a ninja, too? Yeah, he's short with blonde hair. He has tan skin and has 3 whisker-like marks on each cheek. Sasuke almost jumped when he heard a girl squeal behind him. Oh, that sounds like the cute boy I saw at the last festival. Who's your friend Daisuke? Sasuke was not expecting that. The girl reminded Sasuke of Ino. In fact, if they switched bodies, Sasuke wasn't sure that he would be able to tell the difference. He guessed it was true what they said about someone in the world who was just like you. They both liked to poke their noses in somebody else's business. Ah Ruri. Long time no see. This is Sasuke Uchiha. He's looking for a friend. Oh well, if it's any consolation, like I said, I saw someone like that at the festival. Sasuke pushed his bowl away as he offered a seat to the young girl. Was he with anybody? The girl sat there in silence thinking about it and chewing her lip. After a while her eye brightened as he turned in her seat and searched the crowd for someone. Standing up, she cupped her hands around her mouth and yelled over the crowd at an open window across the street. Hey Sana, are you awake? Sasuke winced, and was surprised to see that the crowd paid no attention to the yelling girl. Sasuke presumed that this was a regular occurrence in this town. After a bit, a girl with 2 long brown pigtails poked her head out the window and yelled out a yes. Do you remember back at the last festival that boy with the funny-looking scars on his face that looked really adorable? He's the one that Chi-Chi tried to hug, but we stopped her. Of course I do. I never forget a pretty face. Was he with anyone that night? Sasuke was tempted to just let this go when the girl held up a hand and disappeared from sight. Sasuke saw her exit a door that was under her window and run across the street to join them. Yeah, it was a man in a mask. He was hovering over the little guy all night. At first I thought he was a stalker, but the blondie obviously loved the company because he was smiling most the night. Sasuke leaned back in his chair, only half listening to the girls chat about that night and the sights with Daisuke. So it definitely proved that Naruto had not only gotten the necklace from the mystery masked man, but he had known him prior to that day a little closer than just an acquaintance. That did all click with the time schedule, too. One more question for you ladies, if I may. Sana and Ruri both blushed at Sasuke, obviously easily charmed by his looks and mannerism. They glared at Daisuke who was laughing at their behavior before they both nodded eagerly at the young Uchiha. Did you happen to catch the name of the man the blonde boy was with? No. We never got close enough to really hear what they were talking about, but you might want to ask Chi-Chi. She was around them for a good 30 minutes before we pulled her away. Sana explained to Sasuke. Paying for the food, Sasuke left with Sana and Ruri to go find their friend. He was surprised about how fast it took to find the information, which led him to believe that the masked man either didn't care about people seeing him with Naruto or he wasn't aware that anyone in Gantona would even care to remember. Kami, he must have been blind to not see that this town is a gossip hub. Sasuke thought to himself. Oh, the irony, when they finally did find the other girl, she sadly couldn't remember the name at all. After bidding all 3 girls a quick goodbye and a thank you, Sasuke practically bolted out of Gantona. For one, he really didn't want to be around the girls anymore, who no doubt would have attracted quite a few females to join them. And getting sidetracked by a horde of gossiping and giggling girls was something that Sasuke couldn't afford, especially since he had a hard enough time dodging the annoying fan club he had in Konoha. And the second reason was because he needed to get back to Konoha as soon as possible. There was finally a lead on Naruto and it was evident that if he hadn't done anything about it, then the investigating shinobi still would have no clues. It was completely clear to Sasuke that he could handle this on his own. As Sasuke was running through the trees, a thought crossed his mind about what Ino had said when she had first addressed the necklace. Don't be stupid, billboard brow. That necklace was given to Naruto by Sasuke. She clamped her hand over her mouth as everyone wore shocked expressions. I'm so sorry Sasuke. I didn't mean to tell. She had almost said it as if. Oh hell no. Yeah, it was a man in a mask. He was hovering over the little guy all night. At first I thought he was a stalker, but the blondie obviously loved the company because he was smiling most the night. Sasuke started to run even faster as he thought about it even more. About to reassure himself that it wasn't what it sounded like, Sasuke heard loved the company cross his mind one more time before he threw pride and false reassurances out the window. Yes, there was going to be hell to pay once Sasuke found this guy. No one touches or messes with my Naruto. And the little green Uchiha finally reared his head to the surface. His hands practically shook as they reached up to grasp the mask that covered his pale, smooth face. Naruto. Hearing a clatter of something hit the ground, Naruto lifted his arm off his face to look over at the raven-haired boy across from him. His eyes automatically landed on the white porcelain mask that was discarded on the ground. He barely had any time to think before a pair of glazed-over black eyes, making them look practically gray, searched in his direction. Naruto stared at the smooth pale face, his eyes wide in wonder. His mouth fell open and shut several times before he could really wrap his mind around the fact that the mystery was finally over. Naruto's eyes roamed his face. Black hair, black eyes, pale complexion, and what looked like small frown lines around his mouth. He really would be a complete idiot if he didn't recognize where those features came from. A frown of his own started to work its way onto his face, and even though Naruto was about to speak, he choked on his own words. Naruto couldn't think of anything to say, and just stared until his eyes started to water from not blinking. No, I'm not casting a genjutsu over my face. You can check. Naruto had never been good at dispelling or recognizing a genjutsu, but that was usually only when he was in one. For example, Naruto would have never in the life of him figure out that the room 201 sign was under an illusion. But because he wasn't trapped in an elaborate one, Naruto was able to dispel it, with some effort of course. Placing his fingers together and muttering under his breath, Naruto opened his eyes again to be met with the same sight. Laughing nervously, Naruto tried it 3 more times before he calmly placed his hands back in his lap. Sighing under his breath slowly, it only took a second for hysteria to kick in. Holy fucking shit, no way. He scrambled to his feet, and shook his head to make sure he just wasn't imagining things from lack of ramen consumption or something equally as likely. Right, Naruto, right. His face scrunched up before he bolted over what Naruto had just discovered, the Uchiha. He practically tripped on the stairs as he took 4 at a time to get to his room. Slipping on the floor twice while turning a corner, Naruto swung the door open, leapt in and then made sure that the door was firmly closed and locked behind him. When Sasuke had mentioned he was the last Uchiha, he was surprised enough to have met Itachi Uchiha a few months ago, but now that there was another one right downstairs, that looked awfully like Sasuke, he might add, a heart attack wasn't that much of a far-fetched proclamation. Naruto didn't know what to do considering Uchiha were as strange a group of people you could get. One moment you thought you figured them out, and then suddenly they do something that just baffles you. It really was ridiculous sometimes. He sat in front of the door, tensing when he heard footsteps approach. When he finally saw the shadow under the door, he waited for the door to be kicked open, but was actually astonished to hear the newly discovered Uchiha start to sit on the other side. Naruto, open the door. If I wanted to hurt you, I would have a long time ago. So what are you, Sasuke's cousin or brother twice removed? Naruto bit his tongue at that comment, which sounded a little harsh when he actually voiced it. If he knew anything about Sasuke, it was that mentioning family relation in any shape or form was very dangerous. Well, I look like Sasuke, so it's obvious that I'm fairly close to the main line. Naruto silently nodded his head in agreement. That sounded pretty reasonable, but then again, what did it matter? He was still an Uchiha either way. Just as he was about to ask another question, Naruto thought the last statement over, and something suddenly struck him. The guy was blind, so how would he know anything about how Sasuke looked? In fact, there were a lot of things Atsushi shouldn't have known. You're kind of short and girly looking to be a Hokage. That was proof enough there. Once of the first things the guy had ever said to him. They had just met, and there was no freaking way that he could have known that he was short or girly looking. And he wasn't girly looking. He just had softer features that he probably got from one of his parents, and hopefully he'd grow out of that. But he digresses. Either the guy knew these things prior to their meeting or that he wasn't really blind. Opening the door, he pointed an accusing finger at the older boy sitting cross-legged on the floor. Son of a bitch, you're not really blind, are you? Yes, I'm blind. Then you knew me before you were blind. You can say that, yeah. Haha, I figured it out. You work for the Akatsuki. Atsushi sighed in exasperation. This was getting nowhere. He just assumed that Naruto would come to the most ridiculous conclusion possible, which happened to be the right one in this case, and this would be a lot easier for him, but apparently not. One blind eye slightly twitching, he flicked a strand of hair out of his face. Naruto, I am Sasuke. That's a lie. There's no way. Prove it. Sitting up a little straighter, Sasuke thought about it for a moment before speaking again, since there were so many things he could say. During the Chunin exams, I was late because of Kakashi. The whole stadium knew that. The day we were assigned teams, you and I accidentally kissed. Common knowledge, unfortunately. I saved you from dying on that mission in Wave. Kid had heard that from a lot of people. When our hands got stuck together on that retrieval mission for the golden statue, our fingers were touching under the tar, but neither of us mentioned it because it was too embarrassing. Naruto's mouth fell open at that. He knew for a fact that Sasuke would never had said anything about that, and he made sure to try to actually forget it. But that's not possible. There can't be two Sasukes, right? The silence that followed could only be described as deafening. The sheer amount of tension could have split the Hokage mountain right in half. Naruto sat in front of Sasuke, but still kept his distance. Okay, so assuming that I actually believe this, did real Sasuke botch some kind of quack-a-doodle jutsu and you split off from him or something? First off, I'm as real as you are. Second of all, even if that's a good theory, that's not it. Okay, I got this. You're from the future. It was definitely meant as a joke as he raised his hands up and gave his voice a dramatic touch. But all he was given was a solemn nod. You're from the future? Naruto squeaked out. Another slow nod later, Naruto had fainted in shock. Well, he took it better than I thought. Sasuke shook Naruto to see if he would wake up, but seeing that the boy really was knocked out cold, he lifted the boy in his arms, and set him on the bed inside the room. Thinking it would be wise to not be near the overzealous boy when he woke up, Sasuke walked out of the room and closed the door behind him. He looked up at the ceiling for a moment, rubbed his eyes in frustration and then stalked off. Hopefully Naruto wouldn't make too much of a ruckus when he woke up, but just to be safe, Sasuke decided to buy ramen for negotiation. Sasuke was having a hard time not giving into thoughts like knocking Sakura out. After getting back and turning in his mission scroll, he was ambushed by her the moment he walked into the marketplace to get back home. Whether it was her obsession with him, or concern that another one of her teammates would disappear, Sasuke could care less all the same. She would be such a more valuable team member if she concentrated a lot less on him. Quickly reassuring her that he had only gone out on a mission, he hurried back to his house to renew his supplies. He had considered telling someone about going off and finding Naruto, but he already knew the reactions he would get. The adults would want him to stay home, and his teammates would throw him some kind of pity party with a Sasuke must really miss Naruto theme. He knew it wasn't the smartest idea to go alone, but he wouldn't just sit around while his blonde Dobie was sitting in some dark cell. He sat on his bed for a moment, deciding on whether or not he should leave a note. Sasuke had no idea how long it would take to find Naruto, so after making sure he had a fair amount of money in his bag, Sasuke wrote a quick note. Rereading it, he noticed it wasn't very reassuring, but it certainly got to the point. Placing it on the table closest to the front door, they would be pretty stupid if they thought he was going to let anyone snoop around his house. He jogged through the compound and into the forest behind it. The high wall that surrounded Konoha was pretty much the best-built barrier in any village, but that never stopped Mother Nature. A family of gophers had dug a tunnel from one side of the wall to the other, and over the years, the rain and other animals had made it larger. Sasuke wasn't sure if he could still fit through it anymore, but he could dig part of it out if he couldn't. He promised himself years ago that he would fix it, but he kept it open for just this kind of emergency. Sasuke leapt over a bush, and approaching the high wall in front of him. Checking to see that the guards at the top were looking the other way or walking another direction, Sasuke crawled through a separate set of bushes growing near and against the wall. Freezing to check that no one had sensed him, Sasuke pushed away the rock he had placed over the hole and slipped in. Definitely a tight fit. Sasuke took off his backpack to make more room, and while pushing himself deeper into the hole, he dragged his backpack along. Sweat dripped off his face as 10 minutes passed by, and he got annoyed at the fact that he couldn't wipe it out of his eyes because then he'd get dirt in them. He crawled a few yards farther before Sasuke could see a slight shine of light ahead where the other hole was. Ignoring the bugs that were attaching themselves into his hair and clothes, Sasuke picked up the pace. He had to congratulate himself for not going absolutely insane. Being underground just wasn't his forte. Dusting himself off, Sasuke looked around and continued on his way. Now, Sasuke had thought this through. He wasn't stupid enough to go on a rogue mission without having a plan. Seeing as the guy didn't want anything from the village or Naruto, he would have gotten it a long time ago if he did. The masked man was most likely still staying inside Fire Country borders. It was too bad Fire Country was pretty large, but Sasuke thanked Kami that, for some reason, people loved to talk in this region. It was a bitter memory, but by the time Sasuke had gotten out of the hospital after his family's massacre, the entire country had heard about it. The only good thing about that was that he had had lots of flowers and trinkets to take his anger and frustration out on. Taking out a map of Fire Country, he looked at the marks he had made. He had circled a set of cities and towns around the village. If he was efficient enough with his time, he would be able to visit a city and then a town every 2 days, which was a good enough plan for now. He would stop at nothing to find Naruto, and he swore to himself that he wouldn't sleep peacefully once Naruto was back home with him. "Have you seen Sasuke?" Tsunade asked a group of ninja in the Junin lounge. After they all muttered and shook their heads, Tsunade grunted in annoyance and strutted off. Earlier that morning, she had received a stack of mission completion files to sign off when she saw Sasuke's name on one of the tabs. Out of sheer boredom, she picked the file from the stack and shifted through it. It wasn't that exciting, just a simple escort mission. About to place the file back onto the large stack, Tsunade noticed that the raven-haired boy had not signed at the bottom of the mission evaluation. That was pretty much unheard of since Sasuke was as thorough with his mission reports as Kakashi was at reading his Icha books. Seeing as she wasn't going to find the last Uchiha anytime soon, she decided to put the file on her desk for him to sign when he reappeared. It wasn't uncommon for Sasuke to disappear for long hours, which she guessed was used for training. Seeing as that sounded like a generally reasonable deal, she dragged herself back to her office for another bottle of alcohol. Geez, imagine having two Sasukes. Haha, I don't think I could handle that. Somewhere in the country, two Sasukes gave a heavy sneeze before shaking it off with annoyance. Naruto woke up feeling more or less confused. Rolling off the bed, he ignored the fact his hair looked like it hadn't been combed in a week, and creaked the door open. Keeping himself to the sides of the walls, Naruto slid his way to the end of the hallway, and peeked down the stairs. The first thing he noticed was the porcelain mask, which was laying innocently on top of the wooden table a few feet from the stairway. Trying to look from a different angle, Naruto tried to see if anyone was in the kitchen and wasn't disappointed when he saw him sitting at the kitchen table shifting through a box of random items. "Naruto, I know you're there. Come down." Jumping the full flight of stairs, Naruto rushed into the kitchen ready to start a fight when Sasuke pointed to a pot on the stove. Further inspection relieved it to contain ramen, which he gladly served himself. While he ate, Naruto glanced a few times at him. "So you really are Sasuke?" Pausing in his search for an extra set of tripwire, Sasuke looked up from the box. "It's about time you figured it out, Dobi. Hey. Just because I finally know who you are doesn't mean that you can call me an idiot now." Chuckling under his breath, Sasuke gave a small smirk. "Alright then, Naruto." Nodding his head in triumph, Naruto polished off his bowl of ramen. He'd have to say that this brand wasn't as good as the one at Ichiraku, but better than the ramen at the festival. The festival? Wait a moment? Spinning only his heels, Naruto quickly backed up so that he was flush against the wall in the kitchen farthest from Sasuke. "You kissed me, and I told you all that stuff about Sasuke, you." His face was beet red in embarrassment at the thought of all the times he had talked about Sasuke in front of older Sasuke. He was absolutely mortified at the fact he had confessed not but a few hours ago. "I'm actually quite flattered. To think, my charms were enough to woo my greatest rival." Naruto sputtered in protest even though he knew he was in too deep to deny it. Covering his face with his hands, he tried to avoid the laughter ringing in the room. He attempted to make himself disappear as he heard Sasuke walk towards him. Taking Naruto's wrists in his hands, Sasuke pried Naruto's hands away from his face and set them at his sides. "You know Naruto, I am technically the same Sasuke." Naruto stared at him in confusion, before he turned even brighter. "Okay, so you are kind of the same Sasuke, but still you." Naruto was quickly silenced when a pair of lips crashed into his own. The first time, he had felt a bit of betrayal at the fact he liked Sasuke, but was kissing Atsushi. But with the newfound knowledge that Atsushi was really Sasuke, well, there was only one thought that crossed his mind as he leaned into the kiss. Damn, he's gotten better since the classroom incident. With a small smacking sound, Sasuke ended the kiss. Naruto was slightly dizzy with all the feelings swirling inside of him, and had to physically steady himself so he wouldn't fall over. "You're not very good at this, you know," Sasuke said plainly. He had a completely serious expression on his face as he said it, which made Naruto all the more angry. "Yeah, well, the you of now isn't that good either, so, huh?" Naruto lifted his nose in the air and crossed his arms, but the victory was short-lived as Sasuke started to walk out of the kitchen area. "I'm so glad you kept my kissing skills in mind. Teme."
That's all for now. If you want to see next part, then please like this video and subscribe my channel. Thank you.